Welcome to my channel. Like and subscribe for more novel. Chapter 21 Disadvantages of the Potion. Shen Fei looked at his mouth that was sewn up in front of him, and then the assistants around him were constantly testing the self-healing ability of experimental subject number 1 and comparing it with the data on Logan that Shen Fei had collected before. Mr. Shen, the skin's healing speed is only 500 times that of ordinary people. The black man watched helplessly as a piece of his skin was cut off, and the assistant counted how quickly his wound healed. The muscles are 1,000 times stronger than those of a normal person. The bones are 2,000 times larger than those of ordinary people. Sets of data were constantly being tested, and as Logan listened to the names being called out, he doubted for the first time whether he could escape from the clutches of this devil. So what if he has the ability to heal himself? He is still being studied like a guinea pig. Moreover, this guy's purpose is not to create weapons like Stryker. The weapons have to be used and will be released by him sooner or later. This is also the reason why he was able to get out of trouble in the first place. This guy's purpose is research, and there can never be freedom in research materials. The black man's original joy of gaining extraordinary powers suddenly disappeared, and he felt more severe pain. Because of his self-healing ability, these assistants acted more directly, regardless of his pain. A strange whining sound came from the throat of the black man in experimental subject number 1. The severe pain made him want to faint, but when the sidelines saw that he was showing signs of fainting, he immediately injected a stimulant. Just to test out the most realistic data. Shen Fei listened to the assistant's report and compared it with Logan's data, and soon he frowned. This is definitely not as good as Logan's peak state. After all, the method he used was genetic infection. But he found that the test data was weaker than Logan's today. But it can also reach % of him, and even deep into the bones, it can reach %. Test Logan's data on the same parts again. Logan, who was still watching the experiment on the side, was suddenly stunned. Why was it him again? He wanted to speak, but his assistant had already started to make moves. You devil! Logan growled with a ferocious face, the professor will not let you go. He is dead. Well, no, he should be resurrected in his brother now, but it will take some time to return to his peak state. This time is enough. Shen Fei said calmly, not afraid of Logan's threat at all. During this period of time, it can be said that Logan is the strongest mutant, but in fact, that's it. Like Professor 1 was injected with a large amount of X gene inhibitors, and his abilities should have recovered in the end, but now he is just a useless person. If he hadn't been unable to find where he was, and there would probably be many mutants protecting him. He wanted to find trouble with Magneto. When Logan heard that Shen Fei knew so clearly about the mutants, he even ignored the pain of having his body fluids extracted. How did you know? But Shen Fei was no longer interested in chatting anymore and was constantly calculating and looking at the data handed over by his assistant. Adelman metal. Shen Fei saw the deepest part of the bones. Because Logan's bones were made of adamantium metal, there was no way to cut off some bones for research. He could only use a vibranium drill to drill out a little bit of marrow from the bones. It turns out that Edman metal is not that good. Shen Fei focused his eyes on Logan and asked, do you feel that you are no longer young and that your recovery ability has declined? This is the fate of everyone, even mutants. No, you can't imagine the origin of mutants' abilities. How can you age if you master your self-healing ability? Logan frowned and growled, then what did you say? Of course it's your indestructible adamant metal skeleton. This metal combines with your self-healing factor to form a new active metal that can continue to grow. Your defenses get stronger and your physical discomfort decreases, but your resilience decreases. Because this special metal will inhibit the growth of flesh and blood and release a relatively special substance that destroys your self-healing factors. It was fine before, the time was short. But now you have discovered that as time goes by, your resilience decreases and you start to age. When your self-healing factor is completely destroyed, it will be your death. Shen Fei said that this indestructible metal skeleton should be the reason why Logan entered his twilight years. Logan was stunned. What Shen Fei said seemed to make sense. But it's good and bad, at least it protects your brain. When you lost your memory before, your brain was damaged. Although the brain cells were restored, the memory was lost. Without the protection of that skeleton, someone as reckless as you would lose his memory every day. Shen Fei shook his head. Although he could also try this method, he would at least have to copy a complete Logan before he could consider it. But for him, to reach the defensive power of Logan's skeleton, he has many preparation plans, and there is no need to sacrifice recovery power in exchange for defensive power. Logan was even more stunned after listening to Shen Fei's words. How could this person even know that he had lost his memory? As for the other side, the black man in experimental subject number 1 was constantly having his tissues decomposed and body parts cut off, and his self-healing ability was constantly exerting itself. Soon Shen Fei said, his muscle tissue recovery has slowed down. Well, it's reduced by 20 times that of ordinary people. In Shen Fei's sight, the recovery of the biceps muscle that had been cut off began to slow down. Moreover, the black man's face is sweating more and more, his face is gradually becoming pale, and his eyes have fallen into a state of dilated pupils. Test basic indicators. After a while, Shen Fei looked at the data of the black man who was getting weaker and weaker. His physical indicators were declining rapidly because the cells in his body were spontaneously apoptotic. Apoptosis is controlled by the cell nucleus and is often a special mechanism to remove mutated cells. It also has the effect of degenerating some organs. Blood sugar, blood lipids, and blood pressure are all decreasing rapidly, the sodium and potassium ions in the body are disordered, and the cell membranes in various cells are ruptured. Successive experimental results appeared in front of Shen Fei. Do I need to stop? An assistant asked in a low voice. This is their first successful experiment. If you take care of it for a while, it can be used for a long time. Go on, I need to test its side effects and limits. The other 5 experimental subjects and Logan just watched helplessly as a living person finally seemed to melt and turned into a puddle of mud. The assistant quickly collected the mud and burned it in an incinerator. Shen Fei looked at the final test data and said, test these 5 people. The next step is to calculate how long a bottle of Phoenix solution can last, and how to prevent ordinary people from dying when they gain the ability to heal themselves. End of this chapter. Chapter 22 It doesn't matter, I cheated. Chapter 22 It doesn't matter, I cheated. In the laboratory, Crow, who rushed over after receiving Shen Fei's message, looked at the healing wounds of the man in front of him in amazement. Oh my god! Shen, how on earth did you do it? Give me the injection quickly, so I won't be afraid of dying. Crow looked at Shen Fei now as if he were looking at a god. Could it be that God is really an Oriental? A bottle of this potion can give one such magical power. Although the mechanical arm Shen Fei built before also amazed him, it also allowed him to master a power that can become a transcendent. But the shock brought by this extraordinary physical body is greater than that of mechanical creations. Look first. Shen Fei said calmly. Crow was stunned for a moment. Continue. Suddenly, in Crow's sight, the 2 experimental subjects that were constantly healing, as if they were immortal, seemed to be placed in a high-temperature furnace. In an instant, it turned into a pool of liquid. Jean Crow took 2 steps back to avoid being touched by the disgusting slurry, and the assistant on the side quickly removed the slurry. This is the flaw of Phoenix 1. If the number of times of self-healing is too many, the cells will not be able to withstand the erosion of the genes in the medicine and will eventually undergo self-apoptosis. And every time after self-healing, the body will be fine for a certain period of time, but after it accumulates, the speed of self-healing will slow down until the whole person turns into this thing. Shen Fei handed the Phoenix number 1 in his hand to Crow and said, this is why they turned into thick slurry, because they simply cannot carry the extremely powerful X gene, although it can allow them to possess the X gene for a short period of time. Self-healing factors are produced, but they may be foreign objects or they have not undergone long-term environmental elimination. This gene fragment is extremely unstable and will collapse immediately if used excessively, leading to cell apoptosis. However, although it has flaws, it is still enough to be used as a source of funds. This was also one of the purposes of his research on Logan. He needed a lot of funds, and this thing would allow him to get a lot of money, and then use the knowledge he knew to use leverage to obtain a large amount of funds. Kroll looked at the purple gem-like potion, frowned and said, "The value will drop a lot, and then I won't be able to become a superhero." Crow's tone was a little disappointed. He thought he could become that kind of immortal person. Shen Fei smiled and said, "What should I be afraid of? We are partners. This is just my startup, mainly because the equipment is relatively simple now. It also requires a lot of sophisticated equipment, which we have no money and no way to get now. What do you need?" The raw materials for this potion are still obtained from him. This thing is a bit dangerous, but his ability is still good. You have channels to sell part of it to obtain funds. Acquire a large number of shares in bio-related companies, and finally be able to actually control several laboratories. There is also Osborne Enterprises, which has always been a leader in biotechnology research. Crow nodded. He knew that Shen Fei was better at biological research. Understood. How much does this phoenix produce? As long as he doesn't die, the output is very simple. But if you try something like this, you'll probably be targeted soon. Don't worry, brother, I've been selling vibranium for so long without dying, so I naturally have my own methods. By the way, what about the woman? Shen Fei frowned. Crow was talking about the Black Widow and said, "Where's the leopard? I asked him not to come first. Firstly, you are doing an experiment. Secondly, he will be targeted as soon as he comes. What has that woman been doing lately? In my secret footage, she seems to have entered my room, but I have transferred the information in advance. I will keep the information about Golden Leopard as you asked." Crow doesn't care about cooperating with Golden Leopard at all now. If he goes according to Shen Fei's words, Golden Leopard will only betray him. And now the benefits brought by Golden Leopard are far behind those of Shen Fei. After all, he is a businessman, and businessmen pursue profits. So when Shen Fei said he planned to use the leopard as bait to attract attention, he hesitated and agreed. "Well, I've been paying attention to Osborne's shares recently. With his personality, he may also get involved." Understood. Is there any movement recently over at Hydra? Yes, I received some news that they are still looking for you. Kroll looked a little weird. He now knew from the information he collected that Shen Fei actually escaped from the Hydra base. And it seems that he got something extremely important from Hydra. That's why Hydra chased Shen Fei like a mad dog. Just pay attention. Shen Fei nodded, and after the discussion, he said, "Claude, go and deepen your defenses. This person must not be stolen. The rest of the people go out, I still need to study something." "I know, you should get more rest." Crow knew that Shen Fei had a secret, but everyone had secrets. If he wanted to explore, their cooperation would probably be terminated. There was no need to do it just for a moment of curiosity. The other assistants walked out and the laboratory door closed. "Just open your eyes when you wake up." Shen Fei looked at Logan and said with a smile. "That guy will definitely betray you for the greater good. He can abandon the so-called Golden Leopard, and he can abandon you one day. If you wait until S.H.I.E.L.D. discovers your specialness, you must know that those in S.H.I.E.L.D. will always use whatever means necessary to achieve their goals." Logan sneered and said, he had lived for hundreds of years, he had seen a lot of right and wrong, and he knew Crow's true nature at a glance. "You don't need to worry about this. I have to do some things next, so I can trouble you to get some sleep." Shen Fei mobilized the machine to mix a large amount of high-purity ether and neurotoxins and inject them into Logan's body. You want an injection? Aren't you afraid of death? Logan now understood Shen Fei's true purpose. He wanted to master this self-healing ability. But according to what he said, it is impossible for ordinary people's genes to bear the X gene. Even if this guy is a little special. Could it be? Are you a mutant too? After Logan finished speaking, dizziness invaded his mind and he fell asleep completely. Shen Fei looked weird. When did I become a mutant? He shook his head, picked up the potion and pricked it into his vein. The potion was pushed into his body, and soon he felt a stream of heat flowing through his body. Without saying anything, he cut his wrist with a scalpel. The flesh and blood were cut open, and blood flowed like a stream. Shen Fei didn't even frown. He just looked at the wound on his wrist quietly. The cut flesh quickly condensed and the scab fell off, leaving only a white mark and a little blood. It was successful, and part of it was enough. Shen Fei took a closer look at the picture he just took. There was a green light flashing in the wound. This was the self-healing factor at work. As for the inability to carry the X gene and self-apoptosis, it doesn't matter, I cheated. End of this chapter. Chapter 23 The female spider came to the door in the middle of the night. Chapter 23 The female spider came to the door in the middle of the night. The Phoenix plan has come to an end, and Shen Fei, who has the ability to heal himself, feels much less urgent. With part of Logan's self-healing ability, he can be considered to have the ability to protect himself. In the room, Shen Fei was sitting and looking at the information. Although the Phoenix project had come to an end, his self-healing ability had not reached the peak state he wanted most. The peak of Logan's self-healing ability is what he thinks of most, but now his knowledge and equipment are limited. Osborne Company must be captured as soon as possible. Shen Fei murmured and sent a series of messages to Crow. Looking at the information sent by Crow, it turns out that Osborne's company's stock has been depreciating very quickly recently, and the house is leaking due to continuous rain, and it seems that he has also gotten into trouble with the Tax Bureau and the Environmental Protection Bureau. Their products are constantly being seized, the stock price is plummeting, and Crow is buying a lot of goods. But Crow said there are also big investors who have been hoovering up Osborne's stock. Green Goblin. Shen Fei thought of a possibility. Norman would never be willing to let his company fall into the hands of others, but the board of directors decided that he could not violate it. He was probably planning to take advantage of this heavy bleeding to regain control of Osborne by cutting off his flesh. Shen Fei asked Crow to inhale as much as possible, but to ensure his own safety, the little spider had already appeared, and needless to say the Green Goblin would definitely appear as well. So to avoid that guy jumping over the wall, although Crow now has some extraordinary power, he is still too weak compared to the Green Goblin. Shen Feijing planned to continue to see the situation of Treasure Girl. Before Osborne Company could take over, he first planned to get Jessica. Her abilities were considered to be a low-end version of Superwoman. With her ability, I don't have to passively face attacks. Just how to deal with it? Shen Fei muttered to himself. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Shen Fei glanced at the camera next to him. Natasha was wearing a tight-fitting leather jacket. The tight-fitting leather jacket highlighted Natasha's graceful figure. Who? Boss, I'm Nidalee. The slightly magnetic voice seemed to stir up Shen Fei's heart. Shen Fei shook his head to see what this superhero bus wanted to do. But since they planned to attack in the middle of the night, I'm afraid the attackers are evil. Could it be that they think they have collected the information and are planning to leave? Recently, Natasha has been trying to get close to him from time to time, seemingly intending to gain his trust. She even wanted to stick to him. What was this female spider going to do? S.H.I.E.L.D's target is definitely Crow, or Black Panther and Leopard. I don't know if the female spider had some intuition that something was wrong with him, or if she just wanted to get information about Crow through him. But it won't work if you don't open the door. S.H.I.E.L.D. is also a piece of shit. Shen Fei locked the information back into the password box, opened the door, and found Natasha with big red waves leaning against the door, looking at Shen Fei with watery eyes, and pushing her hands on Shen Fei's chest. "Boss, I want to talk to you about recent work matters. After all, I am your secretary, and I think we should communicate," Natasha said with a smile, walked in and closed the door. She was secretly cursing whether this guy was a man or not. She was already wearing extremely cool clothes in front of him, but this guy still didn't take the bait. She has to be put on bed, right? Shen Fei felt the touch against his body and took 2 steps back to avoid being hit by the bus exhaust. "Tell me, are you dissatisfied with the job? Or are you dissatisfied with the salary?" Natasha saw Shen Fei take 2 steps back. "Are you serious? I made it so obvious, yet I still want to step back." Although Nick said to leave this guy alone, she always felt that this guy had secrets and stayed in the laboratory all the time. In the past few days, she heard someone say that volunteers were sent here. The most likely possibility is that he is doing human experiments here. It just so happened that Crow's intelligence had been collected almost, and he planned to see what was going on with this guy before leaving. "Boss." As soon as Natasha took 2 steps closer, Shen Fei frowned and said, "If there's nothing wrong, get out quickly. This female spider." Suddenly, Natasha took 2 steps closer to Shen Fei, trying to touch Shen Fei's neck with both hands. Shen Fei grabbed her right wrist and said, "What are you going to do?" Natasha secretly tried her best to break away, but found that Shen Fei's hand was like an iron hoop. You must know that she has been professionally trained and her strength is not weaker than that of an adult man. Why is this man so powerful? There's something weird about this guy. Natasha thought that she was leaving anyway, and some secret information had been found. Crow would soon find out that her information had been stolen, and it would be impossible for her to stay. His left hand caressed her waist, and when she wanted to get closer to Shen Fei like a lover in his arms, suddenly Shen Fei's other hand captured her arm again. Natasha looked up and met Shen Fei's eyes, which seemed to be smiling but not smiling. "What do you want to do?" Natasha's right foot suddenly moved towards Shen Fei's crotch, but Shen Fei moved faster than her and kicked with her right foot. Boom! Natasha's face showed pain, but her hands were held by Shen Fei, and her whole body was flying upside down. His slender legs twisted, and his powerful waist tried to pull his hands out of Shen Fei's palms, but Shen Fei had enough strength to pull the helicopter and suddenly threw Natasha to the ground. He twisted the wrists of both her hands without mercy, and something like a button fell out of his palm. "I thought you wouldn't find me yet. I didn't expect you to come to the door so quickly." Shen Fei shook his head. He had been paying attention to Natasha's movements. When she touched her waist just now, she knew what this guy wanted to do. It's true that Natasha is a top spy, but in terms of frontal combat effectiveness, Logan was defeated by Shen Fei, let alone her. Even though she has been transformed, is the degree of transformation comparable to that of the super soldier serum? Button injection? Try it yourself. Shen Fei picked up the button and was about to let Natasha try it on her own, when Natasha suddenly raised her leg and pointed a pistol at Shen Fei. The trigger of this pistol seems to be connected to something. "Stop, if you come here again I'll shoot." Shen Fei walked over with a smile, and Natasha moved her other leg. Boom! The gun rang out, and a blood hole suddenly appeared in Shen Fei's heart. Natasha looked at Shen Fei as if she were a monster, mutant. Because she saw that the blood hole in Shen Fei's heart was recovering. But at this time, Shen Fei had already walked to her side, buttoned the syringe and pressed it into her body. The special solution was injected into Natasha's body. Before she passed out, Natasha seemed to hear a smile. "I left you a gift, I hope you like it." Ha ha ha. End of this chapter. Chapter 24 Chaos. Chapter 24 Chaos. Natasha covered her head and woke up groggily, finding that she was already in a wilderness. "I was actually knocked unconscious by an ordinary person. What happened to that guy's power?" It wasn't that Natasha wasn't confused, but the main reason was that his power was almost the same as the captain's. Wrong. Natasha looked at her intact wrist. She remembered that her wrist had been broken, but now there was nothing wrong with it. He moved his wrist, it was intact. Suddenly her eyes saw a note, "This is a gift for you, you will be immortal within a certain period of time. Ha ha ha, enjoy it. But if Nick knew that you were almost immortal, do you think he would change anything about you? I am looking forward." There was a smiley face drawn at the end of the note. Natasha had just picked up the note when suddenly there was a roar and a bang in the sky. A figure fell down, making a small crater on the ground. The person who came was shining with metallic luster under the sunlight. "Natasha? What happened to you?" The visitor's mask opened, revealing the face of a slightly attractive middle-aged man, who frowned and asked. "Tony, Natasha was just about to tell her story when she suddenly thought of the words on the note, and what happened to her under Nick flashed through her mind. Based on Nick's supervision of extraordinary people, if it is true what that guy said, she may face physical examinations from time to time. Fine. Tony frowned as he listened to Friday's report. Natasha had a mixture of passion potion, high-purity ether, and some potions on her body. Were you in danger while performing your mission? Tony asked more. Natasha shook her head and said with a smile, "It's okay, the problem has been solved now. The mission is a secret." "Okay. Go and persuade Rogers that establishing the Extraordinary Act is to protect us and the people." Tony closed his mask again and soared into the sky. He didn't want to communicate with Natasha because he knew that Natasha actually didn't care whether the bill was correct or not and would only follow the captain. Natasha murmured, "This devil." Shen Fei, the demon who was missed by Natasha, had already moved their residence and knew that they were being targeted by S.H.I.E.L.D. for the purpose of completing the experiment. They had already moved. Now, in a dilapidated house in Queens, New York, Crow and Shen Fei were sitting across from each other. Crow breathed out and said, "I've just enjoyed it for a few days, and I'm leaving again." "In the end, you injected that woman with a phoenix? For what?" "For fun." Shen Fei said with a smile. "Interesting. Do you know how much I price that thing now? $50,000 a bottle. You spent $50,000 just for fun." Crow had a hard time understanding Shen Fei's interest. After letting the woman go, he injected her with a bottle of Phoenix. Shen Fei just smiled and said nothing. Natasha's strangeness would definitely be discovered by Nick. This guy was extremely cautious towards extraordinary people and would exploit them at all costs. If he discovered something strange about Natasha, research would be inevitable. It depends on whether Natasha is loyal to S.H.I.E.L.D. or not. Moreover, the Phoenix's flaws are fine on him, but on others. Whether it's because of too many experiments or too much use. Natasha herself will also find something strange, and there will be only a handful of people who want to solve her problem. At least it will delay those guys from the Avengers for a while. Seeing Shen Fei's mysterious smile, Crow stopped asking, "Forget it, as long as you like it. I have already bought most of Osborne's shares, but besides me there are 2 other big investors who are constantly sucking up shares. But I also hold 21% of the shares. According to calculations, we are close to becoming a major shareholder. The equity transfer letter has been sent to you, please sign it when the time comes." Haven't you been discovered? I asked others to buy it. This is what I do, don't worry. During this period, development continues to develop our power. As for Osborne, there are several laboratories that must be obtained, Connor's laboratory and Richard Parker's laboratory. This is related to the birth of our Phoenix too. I know, and the Phoenix potion has been found to sell it, but the origin is a bit special. Who? Some special organizations that take pleasure in self-destruction. They heard that I had this potion and wanted me to sell it to them. Where's the oil? Shen Fei frowned and asked himself, could it be those people from the Xingyu sect? Clinton sighed. Sell it. Shen Fei said, this has nothing to do with him, just sell it. It is good. Crow waited for Shen Fei to nod, and then continued, I have put most of the blame on Golden Leopard as you said, and Golden Leopard should be caught soon. The information the woman took away was all provided by you. Is all the above true? Of course it is. So Iron Man and Captain America can still be friends. After Crow knew this information, he investigated and found that the identities of the people mentioned here were not simple. Why would Shen Fei know this information? They don't know. Shen Fei asked Crow to leave behind confidential information, which only contained a few sentences after being unlocked, which was the truth about the murder of Howard and his wife. Why do it? If they don't cause chaos, how can I face the Avengers who are a piece of steel? Shen Fei shook his head and dropped the topic, where is Jessica? The treasure girl is at the law firm downstairs. He came to the window and asked Shen Fei to look down. Shen Fei looked at it, a detective agency. Treasure girl should still be confused now, how is the investigation going? Drinking alcohol, sleeping here every day. Is there any way to get her back? No, I've had people try to pretend that those who couldn't talk to her were the ones who wanted to take her away by force. He killed her with one punch. When Crow said this, his eyes were a little frightened. I'll think of a way. If there's no other way, let's take down Osborne Company first and then deal with her. Jessica is a bit special. Her experience in the original comic book is exactly the same as that of the 18-ban comic. She is constantly subjected to various tortures at the hands of Zi-Ren. Even in the series, it's almost the same. Moreover, it would be difficult to control her own abilities. It was fine before the big change, but after the big change, she found that she was even more unable to control her abilities. He was confused and relied on drinking to divert his energy. Crow breathed out, brother, it's really exciting to work with you. We are facing either Hydra, Shield, and all the extraordinary beings. By the way, what do you do with that guy down there? Don't worry for a while. During this period, just let people continue to extract the raw materials needed for Phoenix number 1. He won't die. Let's take a look again when it's almost time. Professor. So there's nothing to worry about. End of this chapter. Chapter 25 Contact Jessica. Chapter 25 Contact Jessica. Shen Fei looked across the street at Jessica, who was staggering towards the detective agency. He needs to find a suitable moment to connect with her, and he can't do it by force. He may not be able to beat Jessica now. Shen Fei looked at the detective agency opposite in the cafe, thought for a while, got up and walked towards the detective agency. He suddenly thought that since Jessica was the detective, wouldn't hiring her with his own money be the easiest way to get in touch with her? As soon as they crossed the road, they saw Jessica walking out of the detective office and pulling up the detective office, as if she had just woken up and was about to close the door. This is too fast, this guy is not short of money at all, is he? Shen Fei's pace quickened, and just when he walked into the street and planned to go to Jessica to speak, a loud noise sounded in the distance. A raging fire appeared in the distance. Ha 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 ha, little spider! You can't catch me! An evil laughter echoed in the sky, and a figure that looked like a goblin on an aircraft was laughing wildly. Green Goblin! Stop! A bright red figure kept leaping across the floors, trying to catch up with the Green Goblin. Little spider! Shen Fei didn't expect that he would meet these two guys just by walking on the street. Spider-Man is known as a good citizen, and it goes without saying that the Green Goblin must have appeared first. Shen Fei took out his mobile phone and sent a text message to Crow, especially because Crow was visited by the Green Goblin. Still chasing? Go rescue people first. Ha 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 ha. Suddenly, pumpkin-shaped bombs flew out of the Green Goblin's hands. Huge explosions sounded one after another, building debris flew and screams continued. Under the mask, Peter's face was full of sorrow. The spider silk in his hand kept flying out to sweep away the gravel, and carried away those who were about to be hit by the falling rocks. Green Goblin, stop! The Green Goblin looked back and saw that the distance he had just opened was now closer, and several more pumpkin bombs appeared in his hand and were thrown around. Shen Fei looked at the red and green figures flying above his head. Sure enough, red and green have been paired with each other since ancient times, and many of Spider-Man's enemies are green. Soon, he saw a pumpkin bomb flying towards the dizzy Jessica. Shen Fei's mind turned, his body jumped suddenly, and he yelled, "Be careful!" Jessica had just sobered up and was feeling dizzy. She had heard an explosion in the distance and just raised her head to see what was going on. She heard a man yelling to be careful. She turned around and saw a figure rushing towards her. She subconsciously punched Shen Fei. But at this moment, a violent roar sounded in her ears. Her detective agency exploded. Rebels flew in all directions and hit her directly, but were shattered by her punch. Just after flying over, Shen Fei felt his abdomen was punched with such force that he spat out the coffee he had just drank, but he felt a little excited in his heart. This is the power I want. Then the whole person fell to the ground like a gourd and rolled several times. Not good. At this time, Jessica's pretty face showed a trace of anxiety. She realized that Shen Fei was trying to save her just now, so she swooped towards her with the purpose of saving her. She actually hit the person she was trying to save. God damn it! After Jessica experienced the Purple Man incident, she became extremely distrustful of people, especially men. But I didn't expect that someone would save me. Are you okay? At this time, Peter came to Jessica and felt the woman's strength and familiar face. However, he did not say who he was, but just asked, "Can you help me save someone?" Wait a minute. Jessica shook her head and quickly ran towards Shen Fei, who was knocked away by her punch. She knew how terrifying her power was. But after seeing Shen Feijing getting up holding his stomach with a painful look on his face, he said in shock, "Are you okay? You have great strength." Shen Fei was naturally fine, even his injuries were healed, but he still said with a painful look on his face, "I feel a little stomachache." Peter didn't see what happened just now, so he had to say hurriedly, "I'll leave if it's okay." Leaving the word "le" behind, he sprayed spider silk from his wrist and chased after the Green Goblin. "I'm here to see you, Jessica. I heard you are a very good detective," Shen Fei said while rubbing his belly. "You know me?" Jessica sat in a coffee shop a little awkwardly. She had unfriendly memories of the coffee shop. It always reminds her of her own unbearable experiences. But because of Shen Fei's previous actions, she felt that Shen Fei was a good person, so she could only hold back her impatience and sit there. "Of course. Otherwise, what would I do to you? But I didn't expect the detective to be so powerful." "Extraordinary?" Shen Fei asked. "Do you know about extraordinary people?" "I just..." Shen Fei said in a low voice, "Otherwise, I would have been killed by you with one punch. I thought you were just an ordinary detective, but I didn't expect you were a transcendent. Are you a mutant?" "I'm not a mutant." When Jessica heard that Shen Fei was almost beaten to death by her punch, she took a deep breath and explained, "My strength was caused by an accident." "Me too. After I was burned in a fire when I was a child, I discovered that I had the ability to heal, so I called myself Phoenix. Isn't it said that everyone has their own title? What's your name?" "Just call me Jessica." Jessica shook her head and did not say what title she had. It seemed that Shen Fei asked too many questions, so Jessica quickly said, "Do you have anything to do with me? What do you need to investigate?" "I almost forgot, help me investigate a person." Shen Fei handed Jessica a file. Jessica took the document and it said Ulysses Crow. "Who is he?" Shen Fei's voice was very cold at this time, "A trafficker. He once kidnapped my brother. I have been looking for his traces. Recently I heard he was coming to New York. But I'm not familiar with the place here, so I'm going to ask you for help. Your brother? I picked up. Jessica glanced at the information, nodded and said, for the sake of your bravery just now, the deposit is not required. I will contact you if there is any news. The person who picked up the information was about to leave the coffee shop that made her uncomfortable because she couldn't bear it anymore. How about you give me a number? Then I can tell you if I have information. Shen Fei said quickly. This number. Don't call me in the middle of the night. If I didn't answer the phone, maybe I fell asleep. Jessica was already very impatient, but with Shen Fei in front of her, she still suppressed her anger, put a card on the table, and left in a hurry. End of this chapter. Chapter 26 Dawn and number 039, Be hard, be soft. Chapter 26 Don't be hard, be soft. Shen Fei left the coffee shop and looked at the news that Crow had sent him. Someone who had helped him buy stocks had been killed by a bomb. Good guy, as expected, the Green Goblin is looking for trouble with these people. Now that I can't beat it with money, I'm starting to use off-market moves. Shen Fei sent what he wanted to do, and soon his phone rang. Shen, what are you doing? Let this woman investigate me. Crow on the other side of the phone was confused. He was still dealing with the men killed by the flying goblin. Shen Fei told him that he had entrusted Jessica to investigate him. He knows how strong Jessica is, this guy really wants him to die, right? Don't worry, I won't let you have any problems. What are you planning to do? Conquer her when she is at her weakest. She is probably being observed by S.H.I.E.L.D. now, so we can't do it forcefully, we can only do it softly. So you let her investigate me. We must have a common topic so that I can be soft. By the way, let someone order flowers for me and send them to his detective agency every day. You guy, are you going to pick her up? Crow really entered, what on earth was this guy thinking? Shen Fei put down the information in his hand and said with a smile, that's right. Only when she is defenseless against me will I have a chance to take action. You're a lunatic. Crow suddenly thought of Shen Fei's plan. Taking advantage of Jessica's broken heart, he planned to take advantage of it and make this woman completely trust him. This guy is an evil ghost from hell wearing human skin. Suddenly, Crow felt a little afraid of Shen Fei. Not only was this guy's scientific talent terrifying, but also his speculation on people's hearts, if he was targeted. Life will definitely be worse than death after that. By the way, can you help me find the military's mutant gene bank? Shen Fei suddenly asked. Are you crazy, or did I hear it wrong? That place is definitely the top secret place in the United States. I can't even ask about it, but you asked me to help you find it. It's better not to dwell on these things. You will cause trouble for me. I'm just asking. Shen Fei didn't care. If it was that simple, he would have captured Professor X and Magneto to study it. Originally, his plan to absorb energy to enhance himself was focused on Xiao, but now Xiao is dead. It is very likely that his body either fell into the hands of the US military or fell into the hands of today's Mao Zedong. There are only two possibilities. Crow finally explained, I found the daredevil you wanted for you, and he is now a lawyer. But I heard that he is having a hot fight with Kingpin recently. Jin is not easy to mess with. Just help me pay attention to his information. Shen Fei said, Daredevil is also his target, super senses. Except for the fact that he has no eyes, his sensory ability can be said to be the best in Marvel, except for some beings who can be regarded as the brain of the universe. The main thing is that Shen Fei can catch this guy now, which is a good thing. A few days later, while looking at the cutting-edge paper issued by Connors, Dr. Lizard, he planned to do his own research to see if he could replicate Connors' experiment. But after reading all of Connors' papers, Shen Fei frowned and said to himself, there is no experimental data? Or the experimental data has been hidden? Shen Fei saved the paper. Now his understanding of Connor's experiment is no less than that of his opponent, but he wants to replicate Connor's experiment. He couldn't do it because he didn't have the equipment and experimental data. Even some of the pharmaceutical formulas were secretive, and it was obvious that they could still achieve the effects in his paper. I'm afraid that Osborn falsified some of the data in this paper, but now Shen Fei feels that Connor's experiment is about to reach the point of being injected into human subjects. Because there is also a video address in the paper, which shows a legless white mouse growing legs again. With his help or data, Phoenix 2 will be born. And he will also be my helper. Shen Fei murmured that Dr. Lizard is a genius. There is no doubt that the serum he created can be said to subvert the boundaries between extraordinary people and ordinary people. It was just a little too hasty because the company didn't support it and ran out of funds. Before human experiments were conducted, he hurriedly injected the lizard serum. If he was given a little more time, he might actually be able to come up with a potion that could regenerate severed limbs. Then I will have an army of undead under my command. Shen Fei put down the information, and now the acquisition of Osborn shares has entered a period of stalemate. Now the only big players are him, Norman and probably Nick. Each share has now been speculated to a relatively high price. Now Logan has become their cash cow, and he learned that Phoenix 1 is now entering the Clinton district in large numbers. Now they can make money faster than before by selling vibranium, mainly because of the constant supply of raw materials. Before, Crow had to save money to sell vibranium. For Phoenix number 1, a large can of raw materials is pumped out every day. With detailed recipes, they are copied continuously. As for the flaws, Crow also made it very clear, but some people still bought them in large quantities. You can imagine how popular this thing is. As for the money earned, Crow was very obedient and used it to acquire various technology companies that were about to go bankrupt, and was still undergoing capital restructuring. The two of them planned to build a business of their own, which was the path they had to take. PIM technology can also be tried. The second-generation Ant-Man. The intelligence network is still too poor. Shen Fei shook his head. The information about the extraordinary people reappeared in the computer, and he combined it with the information he knew to design methods against various extraordinary people. His course is clear. That is to become a super player. Superb scientific research. Otherwise, it will be a complete waste of his own talent. His physical talent can give him the error tolerance to cooperate with many extraordinary powers. However, he will also try other abilities, mainly to see if he can develop a card so that his card slot has room to load it. Just as Shen Fei continued to read the paper, the phone rang, and Shen Fei glanced at it. Jessica? Did you get the news so soon? Shen Fei answered the phone. Hey, it's me, Shen. Shen. I found out about Crow, come to the detective agency. Yeah. I'll come right away. Also, don't let anyone give me flowers again. Jessica's voice was a little annoyed. Shen Fei smiled and said, if you don't like the rose, I'll have someone give you another one. I do not like. Okay. For you. Shen Fei handed the red rose in his hand to Jessica and said with a smile. Jessica frowned and said, didn't I tell you not to buy it? Her voice was full of shame and anger, but her hand unconsciously took the flower handed over by Shen Fei and put it aside. There were flowers sent by Shen Fei, but he just said that this bouquet was given by him personally. Something that may be related to your brother has appeared in Clinton District. It can make people heal faster. It's called Phoenix Potion, which is exactly the same as your name. Jessica said straight to the point. Then we go to Clinton. Let's go now. Don't we have lunch together? End of this chapter. Chapter 27 Chance Encounter, Daredevil. Chapter 27 Chance Encounter, Daredevil. Jessica and Shen Fei walked side by side as they walked out of the restaurant. Jessica said coldly, why don't I feel that you are worried about your brother's situation at all? Didn't you say they were trading at night? It's only the afternoon. Shen Fei looked at the duplicitous Jessica. She clearly ate happily just now, but now she looked urging after coming out. The two hurriedly got into the car and came to Clinton District. But the strangest thing is that the driver told them to drop them off when they were about to enter the Clinton intersection, because drivers from other places need to be charged to enter Clinton. Of course they refused. After Shen Fei and Jessica got off the car, they walked into Clinton District. Shen Fei looked around with interest. This was a novice village, and most people started there. There are many famous characters here, including Daredevil, the Punisher and the Hell Detective. There are even villains like the Hand and the Kingpin. It can be said that although Hell's Kitchen is a small place, it has all the internal organs. The roadside was dirty and messy, and some gangsters with tattoos on their faces and shoulders and daggers in their hands were squatting on the roadside openly. When he saw Jessica, he whistled. Several people on the street saw Shen Fei and Jessica, looked at each other, smiled, and followed them. They're following us. Isn't this a chance for you to show off? Jessica raised her eyebrows. She knew exactly what Shen Fei wanted to do in the past 2 days. In addition to letting her investigate, he also planned to pick up her. She couldn't be so secretive and said with a smile. Shen Fei laughed and said, and soon the people behind him caught up. There were 5 people in total, and 3 people blocking them were enough for them to escape. There were 2 people in front of him, one was bald and holding a dagger, the other was empty-handed but had a pistol dangling from his waist. The empty-handed Huang Mao said with a smile, "Yellow-skinned monkey, why don't you lend us your girlfriend for fun? Otherwise, with your small and short body, your girlfriend might not be satisfied. Your mother told me she was very satisfied." You. When Huang Mao heard Shen Fei speak, he greeted his mother, "Do you want to die? This is Hell's Kitchen. Let your strength speak for itself." Shen Fei glanced around. There was a robbery on the street in broad daylight, but the people around him, whether they were gangsters or pedestrians, seemed not to be surprised. Some even stayed to watch the show. Be obedient and hand over everything you have on you, and leave your girlfriend to play with. Boom! Without saying a word, Shen Fei punched Huang Mao in the nose so hard that it looked like he had opened a dyeing shop. Huang Mao covered his nose in pain, took 2 steps back and shouted loudly, "Hit me!" But Shen Fei's movements were faster than his. He retreated suddenly, knocked someone down with his powerful back, and swept someone to the ground with a sweep of his right leg. 2 people were eliminated in an instant. Jessica took 2 steps back. With her strength, she could kill these guys with 2 punches. But since Shen Fei wants to show off, then give him a chance to show off. The other 2 people reacted, holding the dagger in their hands and slashing at Shen Fei. Shen Fei's left foot was like a steel whip and he swiped at the dagger in the horrified eyes of the 2 people, bang bang. 2 daggers fell to the ground. He turned his waist and swept the 2 of them away with his right leg. By this time Huang Mao had calmed down and was just about to pull out the gun from his waist when a big hand was placed on his waist and pressed his hand on the gun. Huang Mao looked up and saw Shen Fei smiling and saying, "Is this talking about strength? I like it." Even Natasha couldn't break free from Shen Fei's hand, let alone this guy. As Shen Fei's strength increased, Huang Mao's face became more painful and he growled, "I am a subordinate of boss Jin Bin. Jin Bing? I've offended Hydra and Shield, why am I still afraid of you Kingpin?" Shen Fei grabbed the gun from Huang Mao's waist, and with Huang Mao's horrified eyes, shot him twice in the chest, both hitting his heart. Huang Mao fell to the ground with a look of disbelief on his face, and the other 4 people rolled around and tried to leave when they heard Shen Fei say, "If you take one more step, you will not die." These words immediately made them stop and turned around cautiously. Shen Fei looked at Jessica and said with a smile, "It's up to you to deal with it. They were rude just now. Get out of here. You're pretty good at it." Jessica looked at Shen Fei and raised her eyebrows. Shen Fei's fight just now was clean and neat, even better than hers. She was only as strong as Shen Fei. If she had the same strength, she would probably be beaten by Shen Fei. Not solved immediately. There's something interesting about this guy. There is no way, in order to find my brother. I must continue to enhance my own strength. Shen Fei lied. Let's go find a restaurant to sit for a while and chat. Shen Fei said with a smile. Okay. But I want you to treat me. Of course. In an ordinary small restaurant, Shen Fei and Jessica were sitting in the corner. They were discussing what to do tonight. The location of their transaction this time was in a large warehouse. That's Jin Bin's territory. If you enter casually, you will be easily discovered. Jessica wasn't worried, she could get in with just one jump, but what about Shen Fei? I have gone through various trainings, so you can rest assured. Shen Fei said with a smile. At this time, the door of the restaurant was pushed open. Shen Fei looked over and was stunned for a moment. Isn't this a coincidence? A man in a suit walked in. The most eye-catching thing was his eyes with sunglasses and the guide stick in his hand. He walked into the restaurant in a familiar manner and sat down. Then start ordering. The daredevils are here. Soon, Shen Fei figured out the key. The person who was dealing with Crow's men tonight was Kingpin. As his old enemy, it would be a bit strange that Daredevil wouldn't be there. In addition, it is very likely that Phoenix One has been flooding into Clinton's side recently. Daredevil, who considers himself a guardian, discovered the clues and decided to see what was going on. Matt. Jessica followed Shen Fei with her eyes and couldn't help but speak. You know him? Shen Fei was a little surprised, but thinking about it, Jessica and Matt later formed the Defenders Alliance, so they must have known each other, but he didn't expect Jessica to know Matt before she met Luke. Well, a very interesting lawyer. And a supernatural being. After saying the last three words, Jessica lowered her voice, but at this time Matt had already turned his head and looked at Jessica and Shen Fei. Jessica, why are you here? Matt came over, smiled and hugged Jessica. Let's investigate something. Phoenix. Yeah. You know that too. How come I don't know? Matt glanced at Shen Fei and frowned, such a strong magnetic field? Jessica saw Matt looking at Shen Fei, he is my employer and friend. Employer? Friend. Matt also knew Jessica's experience, and it was a bit strange for her to say friend, and also a man. End of this chapter. Chapter 28 The Cruel Trick, Daredevil comes to the door. Chapter 28 The Cruel Trick, Daredevil comes to the door. But Matt is also happy that Jessica has come out of the shadows again. Hello, I'm Matt. My name is Shen Fei, just call me Shen. The two shook hands, and Shen Fei tried his best not to show anything strange. Apart from being blind, this guy's other senses were terrifying, and he even had a sixth sense. He can also construct a perceived map from the information he receives. Sometimes it's even worse than normal people. Since we all have the same goal, why don't we cooperate? Matt asked and looked at Jessica. He knew Jessica better. As long as my employer says it's okay. Of course I'm looking for help. Shen Fei said with a smile, Daredevil, you came to the door yourself. Originally I only wanted to get one, but now, let's get two together. At night, Daredevil appeared in his classic red suit, but Shen Fei was still wearing casual clothes, and even Jessica covered her face with a black cloth. You don't cover your face? Matt asked, and Shen Fei shook his head. Up to you. Matt said, follow me. After saying that, he turned into a phantom in the darkness and kept shuttling through various obstacles. He didn't look like a blind man at all. His guide stick is just his weapon. Shen Fei followed behind, and Jessica followed easily. The three of them quickly came to the opposite side of the road to a large warehouse with two huge white lights shining at the entrance. In addition to the walls, there is also a power grid on top. At this point, I'm afraid they are making a deal. How do you get in? Shen Fei asked softly. There is a blind spot over there. As long as you jump into it within 3 seconds, you won't be discovered. Can you? Of course can. Jessica and Shen Fei followed Matt to another place, where there was almost no light. Jessica jumped suddenly, and her whole figure seemed to fly up and fall into the wall. At this time, Matt was also on the wall. Use hands and feet together. As soon as he turned around, he saw a figure passing him at a faster speed and jumping over the wall. Shen Fei fell to the ground. No matter how abnormal Night Demon's super senses were, his physical ability was still limited, which prevented him from giving full play to the huge gains brought by his super senses. It's better to leave this thing on me. Matt, who had just landed, naturally didn't know that he was being targeted by Shen Fei. Walking in front, he soon landed on top of the warehouse and looked at the two parties trading below. Fix them. After Matt finished speaking, he fell straight into the warehouse, and Jessica did the same. Shen Fei discovered that what these street heroes like most is recklessness, and there is no such thing as a plan. In this case, don't blame me. Shen Fei also fell down. When it fell, it swept over a button on the waist. It fell to the ground with a bang. When Shen Fei fell to the ground, Daredevil and Jessica had already dealt with the people below, and they all fell to the ground. Jessica opened the box between the two parties, and a violent explosion sounded the next moment. Boom! The liquid bomb with a mechanism inside exploded immediately, and the huge shock wave blew Jessica away. At this time, the entire warehouse rang with a harsh buzzer. You are surrounded. There was a loud laugh, Crow's figure appeared, a helicopter appeared on the top of the warehouse, and people holding guns fell down one by one, pointing at Shen Fei and the others. Crow was a little surprised and smiled. You are Logan's brother? Okay, okay. I just happened to catch both of you brothers. Damn it, it's a trap. Jessica, who was blown away, flew back and roared. At this time, Matt's steps were a little dazed, his sound wave. His super senses gave him great convenience, but it also made people aware of his weakness. Although he could sense everything nearby, if the environment was too noisy and the sound waves would continue to change frequency, it will crazily interfere with his construction of the surrounding environment. If he cannot build an environment, he is a useless person. Let's go first. A hole was blown out of Jessica's clothes, and some faint spring light even appeared, but there was no time to pay attention to it. She grabbed Shen Fei with one hand and Matt with the other. At this time, Crow gave an order, and metal storms continued to roll towards the three of them. Jessica jumped suddenly and rushed towards the door. Boom! Another huge explosion exploded at the gate, and the sky-high fire shrouded the three figures. Terrifying bullets continued to fall on Jessica and Shen Fei. Blood flowers kept blooming. Because Shen Fei hugged Matt and growled, I won't die, Jessica is using me as a shield. I'm fine. After Jessica finished speaking, she couldn't help spitting out a mouthful of blood. The violent explosion just now shook her internal organs. Now he was using his own abilities to continuously oppress her internal organs. I can't bear for you to get hurt. Don't worry, I won't die. Shen Fei whispered, and in a daze, Matt couldn't help but look up at Jessica and Shen Fei. Are you still talking about love at this juncture? Hurry up. Otherwise, it will slow down our rush out. There were people surrounding him one after another. The moment Shen Fei pressed the button, his 5-level plan was immediately upgraded to the 5th level. When Jessica heard this, she had no choice but to carry Shen Fei behind her back as a human shield. The princess held Matt in her arms, and then she soared into the sky. Hold me tight. In the air, Jessica couldn't help but turn around and said. At this time, the two lips happened to touch each other. Just as Jessica was about to say something, she found that Shen Fei had fainted. And Matt in her arms also fainted. Can't bear for me to get hurt. Jessica murmured. Shen Fei opened his eyes and saw Jessica lying next to his bed asleep. It seems that last night's plan was successful. It turned out that that scene was just a trick, which made Jessica believe in him even more. As for the plan to directly seduce Jessica, that is simply impossible. If possible, Jessica would have been left alone last night. With her strength, speed, and flying ability, as long as she was prepared, it would be impossible. Matt was just improvised, and he happened to be experimenting with Matt's special attack weapon, the variable frequency sonic device. The effect seems to be remarkable so far. According to the series, loud noises are Daredevil's weakness in the comics. Now he has even strengthened it, adding variable frequency sound waves, which directly interfere with Matt's super senses. That's why Matt behaved so badly last night. Although he will develop very powerfully in the future, now he is just a relatively powerful mortal. As long as Shen Fei is given information and time, it will be easy to deal with a daredevil. End of this chapter. Chapter 29 is really good. Chapter 29 is really good. Take a rest first. Shen Fei seemed to alarm Jessica, who quickly stood up and said, "This is my home. I'll get you some milk." The effect of hundreds of thousands of dollars in Shen Fei's injury was really good. Jessica, who was originally very irritable, is now constantly taking care of him while busy. "Where's Matt?" Shen Fei asked hurriedly, as if he was concerned about Matt. He was fine except for the muzzles on his arms and thighs. On the contrary, Jessica was worried about Shen Fei. After she brought Shen Fei back, she saw that Shen Fei's body was like a leaky bag, if it weren't for Shen Fei's wounds that were constantly recovering. She almost thought Shen Fei was going to die. At this time, the doorbell rang outside, and Jessica quickly stood up and said, "I'm not very good at cooking Eastern food, so I asked my neighbor to help me cook." I went to help her. Shen Fei waited until Jessica went out and murmured in his heart, "I took the bait." Although he doesn't understand women, judging from the psychology he has refined during this period, it seems that his two tricks have left traces on Jessica's heart. It wasn't long before he was able to enjoy the delicious fruit. Thinking of Jessica almost holding him and Matt out of Crow's encirclement, and if it weren't for worrying about him and Matt, Jessica would be able to escape by herself. This woman is still quite scary to him now. However, the sweeter the fruit, the more time the fruit grower needs to spend on processing. As for the villain, Shen Fei came here just to become that powerful being, and women would only affect the speed at which he became stronger. Matt. I don't know if they succeeded. Shen Fei's mobile phone had been broken long ago and he couldn't contact Crow. He had already asked Crow to catch Matt, and now he was pestering Jessica here. Moreover, Matt was injured just last night, and after testing, his equipment was very effective for Matt. If that doesn't catch Matt, then Crow is a loser. Shen Fei lay on the bed and rested for a while. A faint smell of alcohol filled the room, but it looked quite neat. He thought that a drunkard's room would have many empty bottles. "Shen, it's time to eat." Jessica's voice came, and Shen Fei stood up and found that his clothes had been changed. "Fortunately, I made this plan myself, and I hardly brought anything with me." While eating, the neighbor's aunt laughed at her for seeing Jessica sober and such a neat house for the first time, so Jessica couldn't help but cover her face and told her to stop talking. After finishing the meal, Shen Fei said, "The intelligence we received this time was false. It almost put us in a tight siege." "I'm sorry." Jessica took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling. The person who passed the information to her was her former informant. Unexpectedly, this informant almost killed her. "It doesn't matter to me. I'm a phoenix. I must have been beaten into pieces yesterday. Is it okay if it's different? I almost got Matt and you injured." "Matt, forget it, I don't want you to get hurt." Jessica rolled her eyes at Shen Fei. "Matt will probably cry to death if he finds out." What will happen next? After this, Crow must be extremely wary of us. We can just investigate, and Clinton seems to be unsettled recently. We'd better be careful. Understood. Before leaving, Jessica gave Shen Fei a hug, kissed him on the cheek, and whispered, "Give me some time." Of course, gentlemen are always very tolerant of ladies. Shen Fei touched his hand my own cheek. I was actually taken advantage of. I'm hungry for your body, and you're also hungry for mine, right? After leaving Jessica's house, Shen Fei returned to his own house and opened the door. No one was inside, but there was a piece of paper and a mobile phone on the table. There were some strange words written on the paper, and Shen Fei glanced at it. He lit the paper with a lighter and threw it to the ground, where it burned. Picking up the phone, he left the room and went downstairs. There was already a taxi waiting for him. Shen Fei got in directly. The driver picked up the sign and didn't ask where Shen Fei was going. Just drove away. Not long after, the taxi stopped in a manor. The area was sparsely populated and considered a relatively remote part of Manhattan. Shen Fei walked into the manor, and Crow walked out of the house with a smile. "How is it over there? If you take the bait, you'll be rewarded soon. That woman's ability is really terrifying. If it weren't for the blind man and you, she would probably be able to kill most of the people present. Why else would I spend so much time on her?" The two chatted while walking, with people patrolling around from time to time. Walking into the manor, Crow said, "I have 2 laboratories underground, and Logan and the guy you want are both in them. That blind man is really powerful. Even with your equipment, he almost escaped. And many people died. He is not simple, but he has not yet reached his peak state. As long as you find the weakness, you can easily win it." The two of them walked into the underground of the manor while talking. Soon, I came to a laboratory. As soon as I walked in, I saw Matt lying unconscious on the experimental table, and there was blood on his ears. As you said, just turn it up to the maximum power and it will make you deaf. Crow explained that there were still some people in the laboratory. Shen Fei put on his white coat and said, "Let people come in, I have to work." "I know. The volunteers have already prepared it for you. With the potion, 1 person is enough." Soon, 3 assistants walked in, and Shen Fei said, "Inject him with the Phoenix potion. I need to dissect his whole body." Because Daredevil is special, he actually strengthens not only his hearing, but also his sense of smell, touch, and even the sense of the underworld. Therefore, Shen Fei needed to dissect his whole body to see which organs had mutated, so that he could continue to try medicine to guide him. If Phoenix were not used, even Matt might not be able to hold on. Moreover, Shen Fei, the company that caused Matt's mutation in the first place, is still investigating. Matt's mutation is different from the X gene, although it is also a change at the genetic level. But there is no way to use genetic infection. Now we are dissecting Matt, first to understand why Matt has a sense that is comparable to cheating. If he had this kind of perception, coupled with the little spider's spider sense, the combination of the two, unless the person is much stronger than him, is unlikely to hurt him. This is his God on Earth, super reaction, the 2 most critical accessories. Matt woke up after being injected with the Phoenix medicine, and suddenly he said, "Is it you, Shen?" There seemed to be no surprise in his tone, he had already sensed who the person was. End of this chapter. Chapter 30 The Special Structure of Daredevil. Chapter 30 The Special Structure of Daredevil. Sure enough, I can't hide it from you. When you were running away, your heart didn't even beat a little faster, which shows that you had anticipated this situation. And when you said you couldn't bear Jessica getting hurt, your physical state didn't change at all. In other words, you actually don't like Jessica at all. Only she will be fooled by you. Matt's tone was full of calmness, and Shen Fei raised his eyebrows. Then why didn't you remind her? No time to. At this time, Matt's tone became a little helpless. It's just our first meeting, why do you know so much about my weaknesses? This is the key, because Shen Fei prepared a special attack weapon against Matt in advance, so that Matt, who discovered something strange at that time, was no longer able to remind Jessica that there was something wrong with Shen Fei. When he woke up, he found that someone was already arresting him. Matt, who had just woken up, found that he was surrounded by that kind of equipment again, and there was a lot of pepper at the scene that affected his sense of smell. There was nothing he could do. The end result is just lying here. You don't need to know that. Shen Fei responded to Matt casually, then motioned to his assistant, use an otoscope to check the structure of his ears first. Just when Matt was about to say something, a sharp object poked into his ear. The sound of metal rubbing against the ear wall made him frown. You are from the Kingpin or the Hand? Why are you arresting me? This is also what Matt is puzzled about. It feels like Shen Fei caught him for a purpose, but except for his poor eyesight, his other senses and even his memory are very good. Otherwise, how could he be admitted to Columbia University? And because you need to build a city map all the time, it doesn't matter if you don't have a good memory. He thought he had never met Shen Fei. Research, because you are worth studying. Shen Fei looked at the photos sent back by the otoscope and said, your middle ear has undergone such a severe mutation. The middle ear has the tympanic membrane, ossicles, and eustachian tube, which play a role in sound transmission and amplification. The ability to hear distant sounds often indicates that the middle ear is relatively developed, because it is similar to a loudspeaker, which can amplify the sound received in the outer ear many times, and then travel to the cochlea, where it is processed and transmitted to the central nervous system of hearing. But no matter how developed the person is, the auditory ossicles, tympanic cavity, and eardrum are all the same. But now it seems that it has undergone a mutation caused by that special chemical reagent. Matt's middle ear has almost undergone a dramatic change. The structure of the tympanic membrane seems to be thinner and some sarcomas have grown inside the tympanic cavity, but these sarcomas can amplify the sound and seem to be another amplifying structure. Moreover, the structure of the ossicles is extremely complex. It's really exciting. What the hell are you trying to do? Find out the source of your powers. Next, Shen Fei first dissected Matt's ear, compared the actual photos taken with the otoscope, and finally cut off the outer ear directly. He also used a scalpel to penetrate deep into the head and carefully peel out the structure of the inner ear. Because he had to carefully dissect the mastoid process inside the ear. If it were on Matt, it would heal right after it was cut. Matt's face was covered in cold sweat, and severe pain kept passing into his mind. Madman. He even thought he was going to die just now, and he vaguely felt a knife approaching his brain. But soon, he felt that his ears began to grow slowly. Moreover, his eyes were extremely itchy, and the eyes that had been put aside for many years seemed to be growing back. A blur of white light appeared in the sight that was originally nothingness. Your eardrum has changed too much. The specific structure is tighter and tougher than the normal eardrum of the human body, but it is also prone to vibration. The mastoid structure inside the tympanum is so good, it seems a bit similar to the ultrasonic positioning structure inside the bat's ear. No wonder you can build maps and have infrasound. The more Shen Fei studied, the more surprised he became. Matt's change was too powerful. The main reason was that if the potential of this structure could be fully tapped, it could be said that danger would never come to Matt. The auditory ossicles can receive a variety of sound information. Shen Fei looked at Matt, who had fully recovered. Even his eyes had grown back. In Matt's sight, a Chinese man was looking at him with a smile. Wearing a white coat and holding a scalpel in his hand. Congratulations on regaining your sight. But I'm a little curious about how developed your auditory nerve is, and how well you can classify such complex sound information. In Matt's horrified eyes, Shen Fei's hand with surgical gloves groped for his forehead and shaved his hair clean. Shen Fei said calmly, "Prepare formalin for live research." Inject him with stimulants to keep his spirit at a certain threshold. I need to test his reception of sound. Yes. After a while, Shen Fei looked at the thin thread-like nerve tissue under the microscope, but Matt had already been anesthetized. When it came time to peel off the nerve tissue later, Matt could no longer hold on. In order to prevent him from having a nervous breakdown, Shen Fei still had someone inject him with an anesthetic. The nerves are 3 times thicker than normal people, the number of cells overlaps, and the nerve sheaths are too developed. No wonder they can transmit so much information without causing any cumbersomeness. Shen Fei had the nerve sliced and looked at the sleeping Matt and exhaled. It's true that the structure is special, but it should be more like a talent. Someone needs to dig it out. Shen Fei waved the other assistants out. After all, he had been working for a day, not everyone was as energetic as him, and he needed to go out on a date with Jessica tonight. After reading today's information again, I thought of Matt's body structure, stick. Shen Fei remembered that Matt had a master named Gunsu, who was also blind. But his 5 senses are also extremely powerful, and he pays attention to the power of God, also called the sense of proximity. Matt probably hasn't reached that level yet, but Matt is still Gunsu's most proud disciple because his talent is so high. We still have to understand the sense of smell and touch, we will talk about it tomorrow. And we also need to investigate what chemical substance caused him to mutate in the first place. And find the stick man and join hands together. After thinking about what needed to be done next, Shen Fei took off his white coat, cleaned himself, and asked Crow to keep an eye on the 2 laboratories carefully. After leaving Kangri, he took the rose and drove towards Jessica's detective agency. Jessica promised to have a meal with him tonight. Now that the fish is almost hooked, it is better not to put it back into the fish pond. End of this chapter. Chapter 31 Date, Professor Lizard? Chapter 31 Date, Professor Lizard? When Shen Fei came to Jessica's detective agency, he found Jessica waiting on the side of the road very cutely. She looked extremely good-looking, even though she was an extraordinary person and could almost kill someone with one punch. But her figure was slender and not muscular, so a long skirt fit her just right. Coupled with a more delicate face, she is more in line with Eastern aesthetics. Unfortunately, women will affect the speed of my scientific research. Shen Fei drove up to Jessica. When Jessica saw Shen Fei, her face suddenly burst into smiles and she got into the passenger seat. Shen Fei handed the flowers in his hand to Jessica and said with a smile, "Where do you want to eat? I know a very delicious restaurant, why don't we go eat there? As long as you like." Shen Fei looked at the rice noodles in front of him helplessly. Isn't this just rice noodles? The shop was opened by 2 compatriots. When these 2 compatriots saw Shen Fei, they said they would treat him to a free meal. Jessica ate very enthusiastically. Shen Fei asked, "Is Matt okay?" Jessica seemed to be afraid that Shen Fei would misunderstand something, so she quickly explained, "Matt? I didn't ask him. We don't have a close relationship, we just worked together before." "Well, there's blood on your collar." Jessica was a little confused. Shen Fei glanced at it and said with a smile, "Before I came here, I was doing experiments, dissecting rabbits, and accidentally pricked a blood vessel. It might have been splashed." "Doing an experiment? I graduated in bioengineering, didn't I tell you?" "Of course not, but what is it for?" "Research on various projects developed for human health." The 2 began to talk, one willing to listen and the other willing to speak. Shen Fei looked at Jessica's increasingly admiring eyes and said with a smile, "If you are free, I can take you to visit my laboratory. Let me take you to experience the charm of experiment for yourself." "Okay." Jessica nodded. At this moment, Shen Fei suddenly looked across the road. Under the dim light, 2 figures were suddenly colliding, smashing the shop across the road to pieces. 2 figures, one red and one green, were entangled, broken stones and wood were flying everywhere, screams were heard, and people everywhere began to flee to avoid being hurt. It also alarmed this side. Jessica looked over. She hated things that interfered with her date with Shen Fei. It's Spider-Man. Someone has recognized who the red figure is. After all, he is also a good helper for the citizens. Whenever you are in trouble, Spider-Man will appear if you shout. Big Lizard. Jessica's eyes fell on another huge figure, which should be 2 meters tall and extremely large, like a truck. The key is that this figure is covered with green scales, and its palms are the size of cattail leaf fans, with sharp claws. The head part is a lizard head. The whole figure looks like a big lizard standing up. The two figures collided with each other and were almost approaching. Connors has turned into a lizard. Shen Fei frowned, which meant that now that Connors had left Osborn, his plan had failed. He remembered that Connors only became Professor Lizard after Osborn fired him. Connors who became Professor Lizard and Connors who was still human are two different things. The former has completely regarded himself as the leader of the reptiles, and is even trying to turn the entire New York into a kingdom of reptiles. Ambitious, capable, and smart. Connors, who has transformed into Professor Lizard, is affected by the lizard serum. When he becomes human again, he will regret what he has done. Looks like the plans are going to change a bit. Shen Fei felt that there was no intention of the plan being disrupted. After all, plans for many things could not keep up with changes. If there were changes, they could just replan. Jessica had no intention of helping Spider-Man, but pulled Shen Fei up and said, "Let's go." "It is good." Seeing the two figures getting closer and closer, Shen Fei nodded. He didn't expect to get such a reward after coming out, but Spider-Man is really busy. He was fighting the Green Goblin a few days ago, and now he is fighting Dr. Lizard. And I usually help New Yorkers, and I learn quickly. If he wasn't a genius enough, how could he study so well despite spending so much time, and even get the recognition of Stark's arrogance? When leaving, Jessica was always vigilant to avoid hurting Shen Fei in their fight. After the two of them were far away, Shen Fei suddenly said, "My car is still parked there." Jessica was stunned. "What should I do? That car looks like it's worth a lot of money." But looking at the momentum created by the fight between the big one and the small one, I was afraid that the car would be scrapped. If you apply for insurance, you should be able to pay for it. If you really can't, ask Spider-Man to pay for it. Shen Fei smiled and said, "As long as you are happy eating. Then let's walk back." Jessica said with a smile. "It is good." Shen Fei, who sent Jessica home, did not stay. Jessica was just his fish and future experimental material. He did not like to have anything to do with his experimental material now. Returning to the manor outside, while on alert, Shen Fei first came to the laboratory where Wolverine was trapped. After not seeing him for a few days, Logan's aura became much weaker. Even if there is a self-healing factor, using this method will make you weak no matter what. Seeing Shen Fei come in, Logan gathered some energy and said coldly, "You are almost going to die. When the professor recovers, he will definitely come to me." Now Logan can only hope that the professor can quickly restore his abilities. When the professor summons the X-Men, he will find that he is trapped here. "You seem to be in good spirits." The assistant next to him is constantly sorting out the raw materials extracted from Logan, which will be sent to make potions when the time comes. "Actually, if you can tell me where Colossus is, or where the other mutants are, I might consider letting you go." "Roll." Shen Fei said with a smile, "I just came to see you this time to see that there is nothing serious about you. It's not bad, after all, you are also my cash cow." I didn't get any clues about the other mutants from Logan, and I didn't feel sorry for him either. This was normal. But having said that, if Logan is here, it means that the plot over there will be interrupted. He remembers that there is a branch of Hydra over there. One of the core of Hydra, Lady Viper, Viper is there. Logan also had a relationship with Hydra. This is a point that can be exploited. He has never forgotten Hydra. Those mad dogs must also be looking for him, especially the Baron. After his resurrection, this guy has become even more paranoid about ruling the world. Coupled with Captain America's performance, he might have thought that all perfect super soldiers were like Captain America. Let's get rid of Matt first. End of this chapter. Chapter 32 Super Hearing Headphones. Chapter 32 Super Hearing Headphones. Shen Fei came to Matt's laboratory. Although Matt has been injected with Phoenix, the medicine still has flaws, so Shen Fei still has to be careful when using the knife. Coming. Matt already knew what his fate was. Although he didn't know what Shen Fei's purpose was in studying him, it was obvious if he didn't study him thoroughly. It is impossible to let yourself go. Shen Fei put on his white coat and said with a smile, "How does it feel to feel the light again?" The recovery from the Phoenix drug is quite strong. The person who lost his sight due to direct contact with the chemical has now recovered. Not bad. That's fine. It's a little compensation for you. Shen Fei pressed a button, and soon the assistant was in place. Today I plan to dissect all your parts, including your newly grown eyes. If you cooperate well, maybe you won't need to suffer this kind of pain in the future. Shen Fei put on his gloves. The source of Daredevil's abilities is different from that of Wolverine. The source of his abilities should be due to his own special structure. Rather than special substances like self-healing factors, it is impossible to use genetic infection. If he has super hearing, he actually already knows what to use instead. He is the master of scientific research, not bioengineering. If you haven't tried any chemicals that work, he plans to replace it first with micromachines and transplant artificially designed extraordinary hearing. As for the extraordinary sense of smell and touch, I'm afraid we need to find suitable chemicals. As Shen Fei raised and lowered his knife, pieces of organs were peeled off and observed under a microscope. It was seen that Matt's sensory cells, taste and smell cells were completely different from ordinary people. Complex, how can the proliferation and structure of this cell become so exquisite? Shen Fei looked at the cell slices, looked at Daredevil and muttered to himself. He didn't expect that the changes in Matt's body were greater than he imagined. The cells expressed by Matt's genes were completely different from ordinary people. All the sensory organs were very different, including the eyeballs. Moreover, the part of Matt's brain responsible for managing the senses has extremely many folds, which means that his nerves for processing external information are not only thick, but also numerous. This should be caused by those chemical substances. This chemical substance is definitely not ordinary, but it is such a directional mutation. That's definitely impossible. Matt himself is one of those extremely lucky people to have a benign directed mutation. But Shen Fei didn't want randomness, he wanted a definite answer, so he needed to find the chemical, and then understand his ratio and the source of the mutation he led to Matt. Then adjust the raw materials and conduct multiple experiments. It doesn't matter if there are flaws in the end, he was cheating anyway. What a lucky guy! Shen Fei didn't know how much time had passed, but the assistants changed batch after batch. The structure is almost there, but there is no news about the chemical substances. You can try artificial machinery to reproduce super hearing first. Shen Fei rubbed his eyebrows and took off his white coat. Now he has analyzed the source of Matt's ability. If he can get the formula of the chemical substance again, he is confident that he will be able to reproduce it soon, but for now Crow is still investigating whether he can make an external headset comparable to Matt's current hearing. In fact, the biggest change that chemical substance had on Matt was probably his sensory processing nerves. Otherwise, you process so much incoming information. Merely replicating the extraordinary hearing has no effect at all. If ordinary people use it, it will only make them dizzy. The reason Big Super has extraordinary senses is because he has an extraordinary brain to handle this matter. But I'm not too worried. Shen Fei's brain processes information better than Daredevil's. If he hadn't found a way to dissect himself, he would have wanted to dissect himself. Help me find some materials and bring them back. Shen Fei called Crow, and both of his phones now use dedicated encrypted phones. This satellite is for private sale. Although SHIELD is pervasive in the United States, it does not mean that it can be unscrupulous. The United States is a country composed of capital. SHIELD still has to be careful in some places. Okay. Osborne has made progress, and now our shares have reached 34%. Because we move quickly, we are currently considered the largest shareholder. The remaining shares require too much money. If used, it will affect the rest of our plans. Crow's voice said. Money is no object and Osborne's research is the starting point for our plans to continue with acquisitions. You have to be careful these days, SHIELD and Norman won't give up. And I asked someone to go to the company and tell me where Connors lives now. Well, don't worry. After Shen Fei hung up the phone, Crow was still running outside. In addition to controlling the business, he was also looking for some Spider-Man villains, such as Dr. Octopus, Rhinoceros, Sandman, etc. These people are relatively easy to use, and in Shen Fei's eyes, they are also relatively good experimental helpers and materials. Not long after, Shen Fei received an address sent by Crow. 2 days later, Shen Fei was designing his super hearing headphones. Used to temporarily replace the super hearing needed while the chemicals are still being found. Microsensors use components instead of mastoids, to enhance the reception of sound sources in the form of sound encoding. For the eardrum, Matt's eardrum is directly available. The overlapping structures of the malleus, incus, stapes, and tympanum can be removed with vibranium alloy, which can increase the reproduction of the sound source. Matt looked at Shen Fei who was chattering. Because his eardrum had to be taken directly, Matt was transferred to this laboratory. He found that Shen Fei started to fiddle with something after making several cuts on his ears. Soon, 2 thumb-like objects appeared in Shen Fei's hand, which looked like a round ball. Shen Fei put it into his ears, and his ears suddenly stung. This was the effect of the earphones starting to connect to his nerves and destroy the inner chamber of his ears. The next moment, Shen Fei found that there were suddenly a lot of rustling sounds in his ears. It was like many people were talking in his ears. Shen Fei closed his eyes and frowned, then opened them again after a while. We still have to find the chemical. Now Shen Fei's hearing has reached the level of daredevils today, but whether it is training in classification or selective reception of signals, these must be adapted to. If there are chemical substances, it will be based on Shen Fei's own talent. The adaptation speed is definitely much faster than external equipment. This is why Shen Fei must specialize in bioengineering instead of taking the path of mechanical ascension, unless he also coats his nerves with a layer of mechanical devices. It's a pity that I don't have nano-related technology at hand, otherwise I could really try it. End of this chapter. Chapter 33 Brother, do you need help? Chapter 33 Brother, do you need help? Inside an old house. It was a bit desolate all around, and it was already midnight. There was still no light coming from the house. It was dirty and messy, with rats constantly moving around, and there was even some coagulated blood in the room. Inside the house, a huge figure fell to the ground. Connors looked at his arms that were turning green again and growled, "Damn bug! I'm a human, I'm Connors, not a lizard." But his wool continued to erode, and soon one of his eyes suddenly turned into the vertical pupils of a lizard. "Get out of my body!" Connors looked at the green color spreading up from his neck and couldn't help but pinch his neck. Because of this smelly lizard, he hasn't been home for a while. His wife wondered whether he had moved abroad or had cheated on her. And now that he has been fired by the company, he can hardly survive. Destroy this human world, make all reptiles your servants, and you will be the king of reptiles. Death to me! Connors fell to the ground and yelled, only to find that his hands had turned into claws again. "Brother, do you need help?" Suddenly, a voice came in. At the window, Shen Fei was wearing special clothes and holding a vibranium shield, looking at Connors, who fell to the ground. After he arrived at the location Crow sent him, he heard someone screaming in pain through his earphones. Needless to say, it was definitely Connors. Now Osborn is still in a stalemate. It will take some time, but the lizard man can handle it. After this guy turned into a lizard, he has been trying to turn the entire New York into a reptilian kingdom. However, it seems that the lizard personality in him has not actually implemented this plan yet. It must have been the injection of lizard serum just now. At this time, Connors could still be saved. He had not fully accepted his identity as a lizard man, and was still thinking about returning to a real human. He even tried to reverse himself and become a human. But after discovering the reversal, his severed hand reappeared. This shocked him so much that he accepted his identity as a lizardman. But Shen Fei can't solve this. With the lizard serum and phoenix potion, plus Connors, he could develop a more perfect phoenix number 2 in a short time. If you don't want to die, get out. Connors saw Shen Fei by the window and quickly covered his face with his hands. He was afraid of becoming an alien. He kept researching the lizard serum because he was a disabled person, and he hated other people's perception that he was an alien. This feeling drove him to put all his wisdom into the lizard serum. He originally thought that after success, he would get rid of that alien gaze. But he became a lizard man. Compared with disabled people, lizard people are real aliens. How does this make him accept? I can help you solve your problem, Connors. At this time, the green on Connors' neck could no longer be suppressed, and his whole body began to swell, suddenly becoming more than 2 meters tall, and covered with a layer of dark green scales. A huge figure appeared in front of Shen Fei. The lizard head stared at Shen Fei. Can you help me? What can you do to help me, disgusting human? At this time, a tail suddenly swung at Shen Fei. The shield in Shen Fei's hand blocked it. Connors found that he was enough to swing the tail of the vehicle, but now he was blocked by a shield. Are you Captain America? This iconic shield is what everyone thinks is Captain America. No, you can call me Shen. Shen Fei jumped down from the windowsill, stared at Connors and said, I can help you solve your problems and help you become a human again. Go away. If you want to lie to me, even I can't solve it. After the transformation, Professor Lizard was extremely irritable and arrogant. He became even more irritable after hearing Shen Fei's words, and grabbed Shen Fei with a pair of sharp claws in his hand. The power is extremely terrifying. After all, it can fight with the little spider for a long time. But Shen Fei now has super hearing and a vibranium shield, so he just kept blocking Connor's attacks. Connor's current serum is not yet stable, and he resists becoming a lizard from the bottom of his heart. He just needs to hold on for a while and he will recover. Bang bang bang! Continuous collision sounds exploded in the room, and the shield in Shen Fei's hand continued to block. With his current fighting skills, it would be surprising that Connors could still hurt him. Connors is just a scientific researcher who only relies on brute force. Shen Fei felt the force of the slap weakening, and even gave up his defense completely, and kept hitting Connors with his shield. This is my proof. Shen Fei faced Connors' claws and did not dodge. The sharp claws directly cut through Shen Fei's clothes, leaving a huge wound on his chest. But it is recovering at an extremely fast speed. Finally his strong muscles reappeared. How did you do that? The dark green color on Connor's body began to fade. When Connors reappeared, he was stunned and couldn't help but ask. My research, Phoenix Potion. This potion can help people recover from injuries faster, and even broken limbs can be recovered. I have helped a blind man who has been blind for a long time regain his sight. Shen Fei said lightly that he had always been very tolerant of scientific research talents like Connors. After all, these people could help him develop himself quickly. As for the rest of the superheroes, they just know how to fight and kill. It's better to use it as his experimental material. Connors, who had turned into a human again, gasped and said, "How can I trust you? I can give you a new job. Now that I own 30% of Osborne's shares, it will be easy to hold a shareholders' meeting and reappoint you as the leader of the research group." "Osborne? Are you a shareholder of Osborne?" "Well, I have always been very tolerant of scientific research talents. You just need to do things for me. I can give you whatever you want." Shen Fei took out his mobile phone and showed his equity transfer document to Connors. Connors did a double take and knew it was true. "Why?" "Because I'm attracted to your wisdom. I don't like smart people to end up like this. In the end, they can only keep company with some dank, dirty bugs. Come join me, whether it's your work or your life, I can help you." "Then what do you want?" Connors seemed to have regained his breath and stared at Shen Fei and asked. "Your lizard serum research skills, and doing errands for me. Of course I'll pay you. If you think about it, keep up. If you give up, just continue to be your lizard man and bear the alien eyes of others." Shen Fei walked out of the house carrying his shield. He believed that Connors would follow. Because he has no choice. End of this chapter. Chapter 34 The Perfect Lizard Experimental Subject. Chapter 34 The Perfect Lizard Experimental Subject. Not long after Shen Fei walked out, Connors followed him. "Boss. This is the lizard serum technology you want." Connors handed a USB flash drive to Shen Fei. "Well, do you have anything valuable here?" Shen Fei took it and nodded. Osborne Company is deeply involved in the research of bioengineering, because the Osborne family has a genetic disease that makes it easy to die. In order to keep his son Harry alive, Norman made up his mind to conduct biological research. Whether it was the Green Goblin potion that turned him into the Green Goblin, or the research involving extraordinary animals, the most fundamental purpose was to cure his family. Genetic disease. This lizard serum is one of the major achievements, and now he has obtained it. His Phoenix 2 will be released soon, and his self-healing ability will be further improved. There's still something else. I was planning to move some research equipment to the sewers. Connors sighed. You won't have to live in the sewers anymore. In this case, I'll have someone clean it up. Not long after, the sky was slightly bright, and a truck followed the car and drove into Crow's Manor. In the car, Connors learned that the student he was fighting with was Peter, whom he liked. Could it be Richard's extraordinary spider? Connors couldn't help but ask. They were actually studying extraordinary spiders at the time, but later, because of his broken arm, Connors proposed dividing the laboratory to study lizard serum, which coincided with Norman's idea. I went out independently. Yes. Richard was your colleague before he disappeared. Do you know where his relevant research results went? I don't know. Later, he was almost alone in researching it. Unexpectedly, he actually succeeded. Connors said in surprise. Is the data you studied before still there? According to the setting, Spider-Man's abilities are actually given by the spider totem, but in the movie universe, there has never been a clue as to which spider totem the god gave to Peter was. So Shen Fei could only try. If there is nothing he can do, it will be a pity that his little Hulk is gone. Yes, but they are all at home. Bring it over and study it together when the time comes. When he arrived at the manor, Shen Fei found that Crow was still there, but his expression didn't look very good. Saw Shen Fei coming back. Crow wanted to say something, but saw Connors behind him and closed his mouth. Go on, just tell me if you have anything to do. We are all our own people. Connors glanced at Shen Fei, now he is one of his own? The Green Goblin is crazy, more and more shareholders are being killed, and all of my men who asked me to buy stocks have also been killed. Why don't you go find Jessica? After all, the Green Goblin guy may have gotten some of our clues. Green Goblin. Connors was a little confused, what was this? Mainly because he has been focusing on himself and the research on lizard serum recently, and rarely understands the situation outside. That's Norman. Didn't you develop his potion? He injected it himself without undergoing human experiments. After schizophrenia, his new personality is the Green Goblin. Speaking of this, Shen Fei suddenly discovered that many people who suddenly became stronger would have a new personality appear to control the power they suddenly gained. Lizard Man, Green Goblin, Dr. Octopus, and even the Hulk, Sentinel and so on. Similar situations exist. Connors was stunned. His former boss had actually become a supervillain, but it suddenly occurred to him that he seemed to have become a supervillain too. The opponent is also Spider-Man. No need. Wait until he comes to the door. Shen Fei shook his head, looked at Connors and asked, "Follow me." This is... Connors looked at Logan on the operating table, a little stunned again. Is his new boss so cruel? There's a person tied up right here. Logan is still in a coma, and to avoid the pain of extracting the liquid, he will fall into a coma almost as soon as it fails. But now, Logan may have smoked too much. He looks very weak now, and the originally bulging muscles have shriveled up, looking a bit like a fish after being exposed to the sun. This is the key to your cure. Just cut him and you will know. Shen Fei said. Connors followed Shen Fei's instructions and cut a knife on Logan's arm. Then in his surprised eyes, Logan's wound healed rapidly, and in the end it was no different from before. This is the information. You should read it first. See what you think. Shen Fei handed the USB drive on the experimental table to Connors, and he came to the computer and started looking at the information on Su Chao's serum. Although if he wanted to, he could actually research it without much time. The principle is not difficult. The key lies in how to control the dosage of lizard serum. This requires a lot of data. It is not impossible for Shen Fei to create something out of nothing and push it from the most basic to the very high level, but now that there is a ready-made one, why doesn't he just use it? Unless there is nothing else you can do, the feeling of standing on the shoulders of giants is quite refreshing. Soon, Shen Fei began to calculate. With such a high level of completion, Shen Fei would naturally be able to read it all very quickly, and he had even begun to solve the problems in the lizard serum. On the side, Connors was also amazed by the data recorded by Shen Fei and the effect of the medicine. Is this a mutant? For a moment, Connors suddenly felt extremely jealous of mutants. He spent so much time and energy researching the lizard serum. It actually existed in this Logan's body, and it also allowed him to maintain his human form. But he wants to become an alien like a lizard man. Well, mutants are favored by God, but they don't know how to use their abilities to benefit society. The Phoenix potion I developed was obtained from him. Think about it, with that kind of medicine, how many disabled people will be able to regain their normal bodies? Just by sacrificing one person, countless families can return to normal. Shen Fei brainwashed casually, and at the same time called up the formula for the Phoenix #1 potion, and a steady stream of formulas emerged under his hands. The lizard's regenerative ability depends on its genes that allow cells to divide rapidly, producing hyperplastic nodules. The key is this extremely rapid cell division, and the subsequent spread and reinsertion of nerves. The transformation into a lizard man should be due to the infection level of the lizard serum being too strong. But if the self-healing factor exists, will it inhibit this lizard transformation? Various thoughts kept swirling in Shen Fei's mind, and now he wanted to combine these two potions. Suddenly, Shen Fei's eyes fell on Logan. If you want to see the confrontation between self-healing factor and lizard serum, isn't there the best experimental subject here? Adamantine lizard. End of this chapter. Chapter 35 This is my site. Chapter 35 This is my site. While Shen Fei was looking at Logan, Connors finally finished reading what Shen Fei handed him. Boss, you are really a genius. You can actually extract his self-healing factor. Connors glanced at Logan. This was really the best treasure God had given to mankind. But now the Phoenix still has a flaw. I need you to work with me to solve this flaw. It is good. Connors knew what Shen Fei was talking about, which was nothing more than self-healing and self-apoptotic cells. Apoptosis is originally a self-protection mechanism for cell protection. It's just that the apoptosis went too far and the main body composed of cells collapsed directly. This is my improvement on the lizard serum. Take a look and see if there are any ideas in it. Shen Fei incorporated part of the Phoenix formula into the lizard serum. This was just a preliminary idea. Connors was stunned for a moment and looked at Shen Fei's computer. It was densely packed with calculation formulas. He looked at it and quickly found the principle of the lizard serum. His self-healing factor is inherently resistant to foreign objects. I'm thinking that if the cells that undergo apoptosis after using the self-healing factor multiple times are exactly the cells that are transforming into lizards. Connors listened patiently to Shen Fei's ideas, and then put forward his own opinions from time to time. The two discussed continuously and derived the optimal solution in a short period of time. Boss, you are a genius. Connors was a little surprised that he could not keep up with Shen Fei's thoughts. You must know that he has studied lizard serum for nearly 10 years and has a very good understanding of it. But it didn't take long for Shen Fei to get the information, but he digested it so quickly, and even proposed an optimization plan. You are more genius than Peter. Of course. Shen Fei raised his eyebrows. But for testing, we may need human experiments, which is too dangerous. Suddenly, Connors looked at Shen Fei and looked at Logan. Use him to test. He is the best test subject. He can produce self-healing factors by himself. We can speculate whether this kind of thing is possible based on the concentration of self-healing factors in the blood. But if it fails, a big lizard will probably be created. And a big lizard even more terrifying than me. We can try some of them first, and if there are any changes, we can suppress them immediately. I will get the reversal serum out in the next 2 days. You are responsible for conducting experiments on him. It is good. Connors looked at the unconscious Logan and nodded. Don't worry, go back and talk to your wife first, and take some money back. Thank you, boss. Connors is grateful. The concentration of the self-healing factor increased by 30%, and the effect of the lizard serum was eliminated. The cells of the experimental subject began to mutate, showing signs of partial lizardization. Lizardization failed, cells self-apoptotic, the remaining cells did not accelerate division, and apoptosis continued. In the laboratory, the assistant kept talking about experimental phenomena, and Logan's muscles on the experimental table began to melt piece by piece. Connors looked at the experimental data and said, inject him with lizard serum. But I said, inject him with lizard-free serum. Shen Fei said, in the Phoenix series research, Connors's order is equal to my order. In the past 2 days, he has finally realized the benefits of having a scientific research assistant, and he came up with his own ideas. With Connor's rich experience, he can absorb most of it and even understand it. This made his research progress on the Phoenix series much faster. The assistant quickly injected lizard serum into Logan's body. What? The comatose Logan suddenly woke up and screamed. His muscles that were originally shriveled began to swell, and a layer of dark green scales suddenly appeared on his arms. But it stops when it reaches the shoulders. Extract the plasma and lymph fluid from the shoulder. Analyze the components. Then extract the ingredients from your arm and inject the Phoenix to see the required concentration. What did you do to me? Logan growled, looking at his arm that was suddenly covered with dark green armor. But the two ignored him completely. After giving the instructions, Connors breathed out, it would be much more convenient if we had Osborn's equipment. It'll be quick, don't worry. The Green Goblin guy went crazy and took advantage of this moment to break the deadlock on acquiring shares. Now we already own 51% of the shares, and we are just short of the last 16% to become the absolute controlling shareholder. Shen Fei said with a smile that Osborn's shares are almost being divided now. Norman, SHIELD, and minority shareholders large and small. He already accounts for more than half, but not an absolute controlling share. What decision he wants to make requires a shareholders meeting, but if he absolutely controls the company, all he needs to do is give him a notice of whatever decision he wants to make. Osborn can be regarded as the vanguard of his research, and some less important or more dangerous research will be placed in Osborn. Therefore, absolute control must be achieved, and he does not want to discuss all decisions. Suddenly, Shen Fei frowned and pressed the button of the laboratory. Alarms began to sound throughout the estate. Crow, who was watching the intelligence inside the house, was startled by the sound of the alarm. He quickly contacted Shen Fei and asked, "What's wrong?" "The Green Goblin is coming." Shen Fei walked up from the ground carrying his shield and Connors and said, "It has arrived." Shen Fei looked outside the house. Above the swimming pool, a goblin-like creature stood on the aircraft and stared at the three of them. "Ha ha ha, it turns out you three bugs are buying my company." The Green Goblin stared at Shen Fei and the others with an extremely ferocious smile on his face. Suddenly he saw Connors, "So there you are. Traitor." A dart appeared in his hand and flew towards Connors with a swish sound. Shen Fei casually blocked the dart and said, "The research materials you sent me." Shen Fei took 2 steps and came outside to confront the Green Goblin, saying coldly, "You brought this to your door yourself." "Ha ha, damn guy! You are stealing my company. Go to God." The Green Goblin grabbed the pumpkin bomb at his waist, but the next moment he grabbed it with his other hand. His voice changed slightly, "Get away. I can't control myself." "No need to control it. You know, this is my territory," Shen Fei said calmly. Suddenly, a grenade appeared in Shen Fei's hand and he pulled it sharply. Throwing it towards the Green Goblin, with Shen Fei's arm strength, the grenade was extremely fast. But the Green Goblin is not an ordinary person. The Green Goblin stepped on his skateboard and looked at the flying grenades, and his steps slipped. "Dodge the grenade. You're too slow." "Is it?" The grenade that was supposed to have fallen suddenly exploded in the air, but what spewed out was not flames, just many fragments. "OM!" The buzzer sounds. In an instant, the Green Goblin, who was originally controlling the skateboard, suddenly found that the skateboard under his feet was malfunctioning. The strong feeling of weightlessness made the Green Goblin exclaim. Puff! The whole person suddenly fell into the water. He drank a few sips of water and tried to turn over, but suddenly a big hand grabbed his hood. Hit him on the head. With a grunt, the Green Goblin who had just stood up was pushed down again. His strength was completely unable to resist Shen Fei's strength. "Give me a drink. Bedbug? Boil it for me." End of this chapter. Chapter 36, Inviting people to join the gang, the little spider comes to the door. Chapter 36, Inviting people to join the gang, the little spider comes to the door. In the laboratory. "Are you awake, Norman?" Shen Fei looked at Norman, who was handcuffed on the experimental table with magnetic handcuffs. His hood had already been taken off by Shen Fei. After this guy's mind was controlled by the Green Goblin, he didn't work very well. He actually knew that he was acquiring Osborn. And despite the risk of being killed by the Green Goblin, don't you think you have the means to deal with him? Even came to the door in person. People were constantly extracting the fluid from his body to analyze the ingredients of the Green Devil Potion. There is something about the Green Devil Potion. He feels that it is just a medium, not that it is the effect of the potion. But it can still be studied. Although the Green Goblin's own regenerative ability was inhuman, Shen Fei treated him that way. It also made him feel that he was not far from death. It seems that after Shen Fei's rough treatment, Norman's Green Goblin personality was finally hidden again, allowing Norman to face this demon personally. Norman's originally dark green pupils turned back into normal brown pupils. Came back. Shen Fei asked his assistant to stop and continue to extract Norman's body fluids. He had a business to talk to Norman. Nowadays, most of the shares on the market have been divided by 3 parties. If Shen Fei wants to reach 67% control, he must spend a lot of money to continue to acquire shares. And it may not necessarily achieve absolute control. But who would have expected that this guy Norman would come to the door? The shares in his hands plus Norman's shares were enough for him to control Osborne. Who are you? Connors? Why are you here? Norman gasped, stared at Shen Fei and said coldly. You can call me Shen Fei, don't you know? Currently Osborne's largest shareholder. Shen Fei Deo said. Connors glanced at Norman. Now that Norman was no longer his boss, there was no need to flatter him too much. If it hadn't been for Norman's financial support to continue his research, he wouldn't have bothered to help him research the human enhancement potion he needed. Let's talk business. Want the shares in my hands? Stop wishing for anything. Osborne Company will always belong to Osborne. Norman's voice was cold and he refused without saying a word. In his heart, Osborne can only belong to Osborne forever. I can help you solve your genetic disease. Shen Fei has long understood how to recruit these villains. They all have their own reasons for becoming villains. For example, Norman wants to solve his genetic disease, Connors wants to restore his broken arm. It's just that they acted too hastily, and various factors prevented them from controlling the power they suddenly gained. It doesn't matter, Shen Fei can give these to them. Joke. Norman sneered and said that he considered himself a genius, otherwise how could he have founded Osborne Company in the first place? After taking the human enhancement serum, he felt that his IQ had risen again. Otherwise, how could he be obsessed with acquiring Osborne Company back? He is confident that he can make Osborne into an existence that is not weaker than Stark. But he still couldn't solve his problem. How dare this person talk about solving it? Believe it or not, it's up to you. You can insist first, and you will see my sincerity soon. You can think about it then. Shen Fei said with a smile, he has always been sincere. At this moment, Shen Fei suddenly frowned. You have so many tails. Connors, let's go up. Your most promising student is here. Outside the manor, Peter fell on a tree and looked at the heavily guarded manor. In a place without tall buildings around, his combat effectiveness was relatively weak. Could this be the Green Goblin's secret base? Unexpectedly, a pursuit led him to discover the Green Goblin's secret base. He planned to wait until dark before sneaking in to take a look, but at this moment his sharp eyes spotted a familiar person. Professor Connors. Peter saw people walking around in the manor and suddenly became confused. Why is Professor Connors here? He remembers that the tracker Green Goblin also disappeared here. Could it be that Professor Connors is the Green Goblin? He stayed in the tree and watched Connors talking to a person. Unfortunately, he couldn't read lips and didn't know what he was saying. That student of yours is really vigilant. I thought he would come in to see what was going on. Boss, how about I lure him away? If I pretend to go out, he might plan to meet me on the road. Yes. He is still relatively difficult to deal with, mainly because he is now in the sight of some people. Shen Fei remembered that it was during this period that S.H.I.E.L.D. fell into chaos because of the Hydra incident, and it was quickly disbanded and hid in the dark. Soon, civil war broke out. Spider-Man has joined Iron Man's camp. In his opinion, it is because of the Heroes Act, but he feels that this civil war will not be like he imagined, just a few people fighting in an airport. Because he learned from the intelligence collected by Crow that the superheroes appearing in some places seemed to be opposing it. Like the Fantastic Four. Now this world is the Marvel movie world, but at the beginning the protagonists he knew were only the Avengers, but now this is a real world. If the United States passes the Heroes Act, it would be a law that would restrict extraordinary people. I'm afraid there's a lot of commotion among them. I don't know if there are more supporters of Team USA or if there are more supporters of Iron Man. Shen Fei murmured. Peter, who was in the tree, suddenly saw Connors going out in a car. He quickly jumped down from the tree and kept running after the car, taking off his spider suit while running. He must know whether the Green Goblin is Connors. If it is really him, he must find a way to lead Professor Connors back to the right path. Because he thinks Professor Connors is very powerful. At the speed he was going, it wasn't long before he was passing the car, stopped on the road in front of him, and was waiting on the side of the road with a fake look on his face. Just then Connors' car passed by. Connors, who was in the car, saw Peter and said quickly, "Stop." I thought to myself, is this the power of the spider serum? It can run faster than a car. He didn't expect that the serum developed by Richard was so powerful. But that guy is indeed a genius compared to me, but in front of the boss, he is just an ordinary person. Peter, why are you here? I went out to find some experimental materials and got lost while walking. Professor, where are you going? Back to Central City. Do you want to go back? God bless you. Professor, please take me back to Midtown. Connors and Peter tested each other. After getting in the car, Peter began to test Connors's tone, even though Peter had the almost buggy ability of spider sense. But before danger occurs, this ability has no effect. So he doesn't know if Connors is the Green Goblin. End of this chapter. Chapter 37. Chapter 37. When Connors lured Spider-Man away, Shen Fei sighed and moved again. Being targeted by the curious Spider-Man, the key is that the Green Goblin disappears here. Even if Connors is distracted this time, he will definitely come back later. Even if he was diverted every time, Spider-Man would come here many times and he might be targeted by Tony soon. This guy plans to absorb Spider-Man into his camp. It just so happens that Osborn's side has stabilized now, and the Green Goblin is in his hands. It's time for him to take control of Osborn too. As for the Green Goblin's shares, in his opinion, it is already a must-win. The person who notified Crow to start moving the manor had actually started to move it before. He just said that some experiments needed to wait for the results. When I came to the laboratory, I saw Norman tied up on the experimental table. From the look of him, it seemed that he had been invaded by the Green Goblin again. Have you made up your mind? Shen Fei looked at the information he got from Osborn about the human enhancement serum, which was actually the Green Devil potion. In his opinion, this was actually an easy solution. For genetic diseases, the easiest solution is gene editing. It's just that gene editing is almost impossible to experiment on humans because the protein expressed by the gene has been confirmed. If you edit genes now, it may not have any effect at all. And it is likely to cause the stable gene chain to collapse and begin to produce various changes. But for Shen Fei, that's all. Half of Norman's face was in pain, and the other half had a crazy smile. What are you thinking about? Bedbug, get out of here. Forget it. You better disappear, Green Goblin. The Green Goblin is completely unable to communicate, and his mind is filled with destruction, bugs, and the like. Even without the Green Goblin personality, Norman's strength will decline, but he doesn't really need Norman's power. He needs Norman's business acumen and scientific research acumen more. Now he is still acquiring various companies that are about to go bankrupt, but his purpose is not to make money. Money is just one of the means for him to obtain experimental materials. The company is just his tool. Most of his energy must be focused on scientific research. Managing the company is a waste of his energy. Norman is his best choice now. Just like Pepper did to Tony, he needed Norman. Moreover, Norman also has a talent for scientific research. He feels that if the Green Goblin's personality hadn't had such a great influence on him and he put his talent into full play, maybe Osborn would really be able to rival Stark in the future. After all, the 21st century is the century of biology. Shen Fei suddenly thought of the joke from his previous life. Regardless of the clamoring Green Goblin, he had a more important date today, and the exchanges during this period of time made Jessica almost fall in love with him. Coming soon. Outside the detective station, Jessica was standing on the roadside, looking both ways from time to time, as if waiting for something. Jessica dressed more ladylike today and put on a long skirt that she had not worn for a long time. Naturally, after she gained her ability, she never wore a long skirt again. Because it is easy to lose sight when using abilities. Suddenly a tourist car stopped next to Jessica and said with a smile. "Hello, ma'am. Do you have a date tonight?" "Yes, thank you." Jessica saw the man in the driver's seat, wearing a pair of sunglasses, a slight beard on his chin, and his hair seemed to have been fixed with hairspray all year round. At first glance, he was a very slutty person. "Can you ask him to wait? Just say you went on a date with Iron Man." The man took off his sunglasses, revealing Tony's face, but it was beyond his expectation. Jessica said without any expression, "Hello." Then he continued to look around, not caring about what Tony said about Iron Man. Tony wasn't angry either, interesting woman. At this time, a relatively ordinary-looking car drove over, and Jessica, who was still looking at it, suddenly smiled. Quickly walked to the side of this car. Shen Fei smiled and asked Jessica, who was waiting on the roadside, "Have you been waiting for a long time? Because some important materials for the experiment have arrived and need to be processed." "No, I just arrived too." Jessica smiled and opened the car door and got in the car. "These are flowers for you." Shen Fei took out a bouquet of flowers from the back seat and handed it to Jessica. "Thank you. Let's go, today I'll invite a chef from somewhere else to take you to eat delicious food." Shen Fei looked at the luxury car in front of him and frowned. Why doesn't this guy leave? Are you really not afraid of the traffic police catching him? You shouldn't be afraid. He said he was Iron Man. He also said he just asked me if I had anyone to date. Shen Fei asked, "Is that the slutty Iron Man?" "Ah! How did this guy come here?" Shen Fei was confused, but he didn't show anything. Seeing Jessica's half-smiling expression, he said, "Isn't he just Iron Man? Was this woman planning to make him jealous?" At this time, Shen Fei's car window was knocked twice. Shen Fei's super hearing had already heard someone approaching and lowered the window. "Dude, let me date this lady tonight and this car is yours." Tony raised his eyebrows. Although he had promised Pepper to take care of her, this woman was different, a little special. It seemed like he had read her record. She was also a superhero once, called Precious Girl. But he didn't know what happened, and he disappeared for a while. When he passed by the detective agency just now, he remembered that he had read Jessica's information. He has been recruiting troops recently, and he plans to discuss related ideas for extraordinary people to see if they can be included in his team. But I didn't dare to say it openly, lest I irritate her, so I decided to use the excuse of a date to talk. Unexpectedly, it was rejected. Shen Fei took a glance, rolled up the car window again, beeped, turned on the lights and drove around the car in front, leaving Tony with a confused look on his face. This guy doesn't recognize who I am. Tony didn't expect that he was ignored. Friday. Help me find out who this guy is. It has been found. The information is on the eyes. Soon, Tony looked at the information on his glasses and looked at the driving vehicle, Vibranium dealer. Osborne's major shareholder. Osborne's stock price was falling crazily because of Norman's operations. Moreover, the stock price has plummeted even more recently under the pressure of SHIELD. SHIELD is in chaos, and Nick is nowhere to be found. But suddenly he made such a move. Nick must be behind it. Shen Fei, that's interesting. Tony got into his car and said, "On Friday, collect information on Shen Fei and Osborne. Pay attention to their movements, but I didn't expect to be related to the Black Panther." Let's deal with the little spider first. After saying that, there was a boom and turned into a phantom and left the place. End of this chapter. Chapter 38 The fish was caught. Chapter 38 The fish was caught. Is this a feast? Jessica was a little surprised as she watched the chef in front of her cooking rice noodles in an extremely high-end restaurant. You like it, don't you? I specially invited a chef from the East. Suddenly, there was a tangy fragrance that made Jessica's eyes widen. It smells so good. Eat. Soon, 2 bowls of rice noodles were delivered. Jessica couldn't help but start moving, and after a while Jessica burped. And this, a gift for you. Shen Fei suddenly took out a box and placed it on the table. Jessica looked at Shen Fei with suspicion. You won't propose to me, will you? We haven't known each other for long. Ha ha ha, that's not the case. Open it and take a look. Shen Fei said with a smile. Jessica opened the box. Under the light, the necklace inside the box shone with brilliance. The most important thing was the name made up of a series of diamonds in the middle. That's Jessica's name. For a moment, Jessica felt as if her head had been hit hard. There is no woman who doesn't like sparkling things, women are all dragons. If she doesn't like it, it's probably not as eye-catching as she is. And Jessica's first title was called Treasure. You know how much she loves these gems. This is for me. Jessica was a little in disbelief. Ah! Shen Fei had been preparing this thing for a long time, and now he felt that it was almost ready and it was time to take it out. Let me help you put it on. Shen Fei took it out of the box, walked to Jessica and put it on for her. Does it look good? Jessica asked with a smile. Nice. Shen Fei nodded. I'm so good looking, so why don't you invite me for a drink? Jessica took the initiative as never before and said with a smile. If you want. Shen Fei looked at the waves in Jessica's eyes and finally took it. Jessica is the one he spends the most effort on, but it's a pity that he doesn't have the control ability of Ziren, otherwise there would be no need for so much trouble. This made him still have to take time to study love science and psychology during his research. I have worked hard for so long. It's finally time to eat that sweet fruit. In the room, Jessica sat opposite Shen Fei with a smile on her face. With a glass of red wine in each hand, Jessica suddenly asked, Do you really like me? Of course. The first time I saw you, I fell in love. I hope so. I actually hate it when people lie to me. Will you lie to me? Jessica continued to ask. No. What's the matter? Shen Fei said a little confused. Jessica shook her head and said, It's nothing. Picked up the wine glass and smelled it. After smelling it, he said doubtfully, This wine is too fragrant. I prepared it myself. You can try it. Tasty. Nice drink. You won't lie to me, will you? How could I lie to you? Jessica drank the glass of red wine and suddenly shook her head. You're a little dizzy after drinking this wine. You don't want to get me drunk, and then? Shen Fei said with a smile, This is the wine I mixed myself, it will make people feel ecstatic. Is this it? It tastes good. Jessica shook her head. But, I'm too dizzy. Jessica couldn't help but pounced towards Shen Fei. Shen Fei smelled the fragrance in his arms and said, I finally got it. How could she, a frequent drinker, faint after just 2 cups? The walls of this cup were coated with neurotoxins. Because of Jessica's superhuman physique, he specially added a little dose. Shen Fei took out his phone and said, It's solved. Suddenly, Jessica, who had her eyes closed tightly, suddenly opened her eyes, raised her head and stared at Shen Fei, her eyes clear. What has been solved? Shen Fei lowered his head, looked into Jessica's eyes, showed a smile and said, I said you solved it. The next moment, Jessica waved her fist and punched Shen Fei in the abdomen, only to find that Shen Fei seemed to be fine. Why did you lie to me? Why lie to me? Why lie to me? Jessica stared at Shen Fei, her voice became more and more hysterical, and her face was full of anger. Shen Fei stood up and took 2 steps back and said, I'm wondering how you found out. I was told Matt was missing. I used some means to investigate and found that he was captured by Crow. And someone sent me a message saying that the transaction was actually a show. You actually know Crow, that scene was just your pretending to be injured. Jessica stared at Shen Fei. When she found out, she almost collapsed. The appearance of Shen Fei was like a ray of light to her that broke the darkness in her heart, but the facts she investigated told her. It all has a purpose. Remember this. I will let you go this time. If you let me see you next time, you will be dead. Jessica looked at Shen Fei's face, and all the waves in her eyes turned cold. But the warmth Shen Fei gave her during this period helped her get out of this decadent period. Let him go this time. Wait. Shen Fei suddenly stopped Jessica. What else do you want? Jessica turned back and stared at Shen Fei. Don't you feel dizzy? Do you think these medicines can make me faint? I went to the pharmacy to take some medicine before coming here. No, since you know that I have a purpose for you, why do you still accept the necklace I gave you? Aren't you worried about any problems? The next moment, Jessica felt a stinging pain on the back of her neck. You? Why? Why even the gift you gave me has a mechanism? Jessica was completely desperate when Shen Fei gave her the necklace. She really thought Shen Fei liked her. But why does the necklace even have a mechanism? The anger that could no longer be suppressed made her step forward and punch Shen Fei with a punch. As if in anticipation, Shen Fei rolled to the side and just rolled to the edge of the bed. A shield was pulled out from under the bed, and at this moment, a figure's fist suddenly hit his head. Shen Fei put the shield on his head. Then his right leg suddenly swept away, great power, but poor technique. Jessica was caught off guard and was swept to the ground. She rolled over looking at the shield that was suddenly hammering towards her abdomen. But at this time, a ball rolled to her side, and a terrifying electric current burst out instantly, like chains or flowers. Electricity rushed into Jessica's body. Jessica's whole body felt numb, and her eyes couldn't help but roll up. Relying on her powerful body, Jessica forced herself to wake up, stretched out her arms, and wanted to fly out. But at this time, a shield stopped in front of her. Jessica kneeled, trying to avoid Shen Fei's shield, but Shen Fei had already anticipated it and stepped back, causing Jessica's attack to fail. Just when Jessica was still thinking about continuing to attack, an irresistible dizziness suddenly surged into her heart, and she wanted to grab Shen Fei, but her feet were weak, and she fell softly to the ground. A pair of beautiful eyes glanced at Shen Fei before closing them. I can still carry it quite well. I fainted after moving for so long. Shen Fei shook his head and picked up Jessica. Finally got it. End of this chapter. Chapter 39 Need Your Consent? Chapter 39 Need Your Consent? In a truck, Shen Fei looked at Jessica, whose hands and legs were cuffed by magnetic handcuffs, and the joints of the magnetic handcuffs were filled with vibranium. He spent a lot of money to build it. Just to catch relatively powerful heroes like Jessica. Shen Fei took out the vibranium protective belt from his arms, which he had already prepared. He had prepared 2 plans before coming. He actually suspected that Jessica had noticed some clues. He didn't expect that Jessica's methods were better than he imagined. In addition, Jessica already has the relatively rare detective attribute. Still have some brains. But against the prepared Shen Fei, that was it. Open your eyes when you wake up. I didn't expect you to be so resistant to medicine. Shen Fei looked at Jessica, who was lying down pretending to sleep, and smiled. Fraud. Jessica opened her eyes and whispered. No way, this is the only way I can get close to you. Although you do have a lot of ideas and have found evidence that I have an ulterior motive, that's all. When you agreed to go to dinner with me yesterday, your outcome was already determined. You really don't like me? The purpose of everything is to achieve this result. Jessica tried her best, but found that she couldn't break free of the handcuffs. Her voice was a little sad. Would you develop feelings for the guinea pig you are going to experiment on? All my motives are to achieve my goal. Shen Fei's voice was cold. As long as he set a goal, he would do it. The love between children has no effect on him at all. God has given him such ability, but it is too outrageous for him to use it to fall in love. You arrive. Shen Fei interrupted Jessica's words, and the originally moving truck stopped. The van was opened. After being pushed away under Jessica's hateful eyes, Shen Fei arrived at the top floor of the Osborne building, where the remaining shareholders who had been summoned had already gathered. Because most of the shares have been divided among 3 parties. When Shen Fei arrived, he looked at an acquaintance. Hill? Is this woman a representative of S.H.I.E.L.D.? Shen Fei informed him of his decision. After Connors, he will be the director of the research department. I will have to review all Osborne's research from now on. Wait a minute. I have objections to this, and I also want to review the company's research. At this time, Hill raised his hand and spoke. You don't have this qualification. If you have more than 34% of the shares, according to the company's regulations, you must be given a share, but you only have less than 20%. The proposal was rejected. Shen Fei shook his head and refused. Hill squinted his eyes. Why did the company come up with this rule? The application was just approved today. Shen Fei looked at Hill with a smile, and then said, the meeting is over. You. When was this regulation passed without our consent? Hill took a deep breath and his chest rose and fell. Gritting their teeth, they could have obtained the shares in Norman's hands, but for some reason Norman suddenly disappeared, otherwise they would have used their methods. Norman would obediently give them all his shares. But now no one can find it, so how can we give it to them? What are you thinking? Do you own 1/3 of the shares? This provision does not involve the company's asset reorganization and liquidation. Does it require your consent? Shen Fei said with a smile. At this moment, a young man rushed in and shouted at Shen Fei, I don't agree. Shen Fei turned around and saw that this young man's hair was a little thin and his skin was fair. Harry. I don't agree with your rules. Harry stood next to Hill and stared at Shen Fei angrily. What right do you have to disagree? Shen Fei took a look and found out that he had contacted Harry, but Harry didn't have any equity in his hands. Norman is my father, until my father comes back. I can make this decision. You think kids are playing house? Your father didn't explicitly say that he wanted to transfer the equity to you. What right do you have to make this decision? And your father is missing now, not dead. Shen Fei said calmly. You were the one who kidnapped my father. Some things can be eaten randomly, but words cannot be said casually. This is a democratic country, and you need to provide evidence, otherwise I sue you for defamation and injury to private property rights. Shen Fei waved his hand. I won't talk to you anymore, it's a waste of time. If you really don't accept it, just sue me. I have plenty of time to fight with you. After saying that, regardless of Hill and Harry's expressions, he led Connors and left. On the way to the lab, is the Green Goblin reversal serum working? Some problems have been found, but they have not been solved yet. Send me the question, we need Norman. By the way, this is what happened to Phoenix too. Prepare for human trials. It is good. Shen Fei nodded. Put those few experimental materials in the most secure place and let Crow guard them. They are our precious wealth. Understood. Connors asked in a low voice, Boss, are you going to see the amazing spider? Let's go and have a look. It's also just in time to see if Richard has left anything behind. Connors carried Shen Fei to a laboratory. The laboratory was arranged like a wild jungle, surrounded by low shrubs, with colorful spiders floating on the shrubs. Since Richard disappeared, these spiders have been raised by me. But I didn't put my mind on it. I just let people put some insects in from time to time. Connors thought of Peter's terrifying fighting power. If Shen Fei hadn't told him, he wouldn't have known that the source of Peter's ability was actually these spiders. Shen Fei looked at these spiders and said, "Let people tidy up this place." When the Phoenix No. 2 potion is completed, the next target is the spider serum. By the way, show me the information that Richard left behind. Yes. Shen Fei didn't dare to guarantee whether he could become Spider-Man. But these spiders definitely have research value, and he remembered that Richard directly used Peter's genes for research. He can also learn this method. This may help Shen Fei master a new method of making pharmaceuticals. At that time, you can also create a large army of lizards, an army of Green Goblin and even an army of Hulk. And he doesn't need Spider-Man's other abilities, but Spider Sense is a must. This is the one section he's super responsive to. Because Richard and Connors were colleagues at the beginning. The starting point of their research methods is definitely the same, it's just that they branched out. The lizard serum and the spider serum ultimately have the same origin, it just means that Richard is more genius and found this balance. So he needs to find a way. Since the lizard serum can give the injector part of the lizard's abilities, he only needs that part of the spider's abilities. Although he already has an idea for the reversal serum, gaining the strengths of others is the spirit of scientific research. It's time for fun research again. End of this chapter. Chapter 40 Phoenix No. 2, Next Step Plan. Chapter 40 Phoenix No. 2, Next Step Plan. In the next few days, Shen Fei spent time in the laboratory and Connors continued to study the genetic scissors. Yes, they are genetic scissors. After Shen Fei got it to the laboratory, he found that the accuracy of the currently existing genetic scissors was too low. But you must know that although Osborne's stock price has plummeted today, their technology is a leading company in bioengineering. Its gene editing technology is so weak, and the development of gene editing in this world is still in its infancy. He, Shen Fei, suspected that there was a problem with the lizard serum and the green devil potion, and this was also part of the reason. In the past few days, Shen Fei has been searching for enzymes that can be quickly integrated into the genome on various bacteria. Boss, Staphylococcus aureus has been found. Connors suddenly said hurriedly. Shen Fei came to the microscope and nodded, "These are the scissors we want. What virus did you use for experiments before?" "Adenovirus. Enable lab rats for experiments. Directly use the part of the lizard serum that affects the self-healing ability to recreate your experiment. And study it directly on laboratory mice." Shen Fei continued to operate on the computer, and the robotic arm continued to operate on a laboratory mouse. The viruses implanted with overlap shearing enzyme and lizard serum genes were observed under a microscope as they entered the bodies of experimental mice. Soon, Connors looked at the genetically edited experimental mouse in surprise. Suddenly, the hair on its surface kept falling off, and patches of scales grew out. "This is amazing." Connors looked at this directional mutation. He has been researching for several years, and even needs to use a large amount of experimental data to prove how to produce benign mutations with the greatest probability. But Shen Fei has already done it. "Boss, how did you find out?" "In the past few days, I have been reading a lot about the development history of all bacteria and various studies. If gene editing is needed, we must find organisms that are extremely prone to mutation," Shen Fei explained while observing Staphylococcus aureus. Connors was stunned. "Is this a genius? The ideas are so wild and wild. Let's get started, bring in the Phoenix experimental subjects, and let the company recruit volunteers." Shen Fei looked at the extracted nuclease, which he temporarily called overlap shearing enzyme. This would be a new starting point for his gene editing. Logan was pulled in, and assistants walked into the laboratory one by one. "Because I just started experimenting." Logan was still conscious, That lady wants to kill you, what did you do? The Phoenix experimental body is in place. Shen Fei glanced at Logan and ignored the lady in his mouth. Needless to say, this lady is Jessica. Nowadays, the 4 more useful experimental subjects are all covered with vibranium cages, and Logan, who can extend Edmund's claws, has to recuff his hands with vibranium handcuffs after each experiment. If Logan fully explodes, it will be easier for him to escape than Jessica. Tell me about it. As long as you don't turn me into that green monster, I'm willing to cooperate with your experiment. How about it? Did you talk about something in the prison? You have 500 micromonitors installed there. Every move you make is under my sight. Shen Fei no longer cared about Logan, but asked people to extract various bodily fluids from Logan. Connors, give me some of your blood. He needs to observe the genetic sequences of 2 people at the same time, where is the genetic entry point, and how to most efficiently match their genes. While Connors was looking at godlike eyes, Shen Fei was quickly browsing all the genomes. The genomes on both sides of the screen were originally red, but Shen Fei continued to simulate them. Rearrange and combine the 4 purines inside, and finally form a new gene sequence in the middle of the screen. Shen Fei wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. Compare the genes to see if they are similar to the ingredients that Logan almost separated from the lizard flower before. Soon, Connors nodded with ecstasy. Boss, the similarity is 99.87%. But the genetic model that the boss constructed is even more subtle, it is also more stable and has no external influence of its own. Experiment on the lab rats first. Then experiment on Logan, and wait until the volunteers come. Enable human experimentation. Connors looked expectantly at the lizard rat in the experimental cage, which was full of scales. The dark green scales on its body began to fall off, and its white hair grew back. Boss. Conduct a self-healing ability test to see how much the self-healing ability has declined. I have proposed some self-healing factors that can reach the level of just enough to cause them to apoptotic lizard cells. Shen Fei looked at Connors. Do you want to conduct the experiment yourself? Yet. I don't want to be a lizard man anymore. Connors's eyes suddenly flashed with vertical pupils. Isn't it bad to be a lizard? Connors's voice was a little thick at this moment, and green streaks began to spread on his neck again. Get out of my body! Connors growled. Now his life is prosperous and his originally poor family is also secure. There is no need to take risks anymore. Then let's get started. Human experiments are just for safety reasons. The reagents in Shen Fei's hands kept shaking, various reagents changed in his hands, and the last bottle of bright green reagent appeared. Let's start. Shen Fei handed the reagent in his hand to Connors. Connors took a deep breath, picked up the syringe and injected it into his triceps. Soon, scales kept coming out of Connors' body, and the green color kept spreading on Connors' neck. Connors saw that he suddenly turned into a lizard man and looked at Shen Fei in shock. Boss, failed. His voice trembled a little, and finally the green color spread to Connors' head, and a huge lizard head suddenly appeared. Wait a minute. The self-healing factor is now killing the lizard cells in your body. Damn it, human beings. The lizard's head suddenly showed an extremely painful expression. The scales on Connor's body continued to fall off, and his head turned into a primate appearance again. Connors gasped and fell to the ground, but his face looked ecstatic. Because he felt that the lizard had finally disappeared. Get up. Phoenix 2 is considered a success, but unfortunately it's not what I wanted. Shen Fei sounded a little disappointed. This thing solved the problem of cell collapse of Phoenix 1, but it also reduced its self-healing ability. Connors quickly got up from the ground and looked at his left arm that still existed. Now you can be considered a superhero, but you must pay attention to the number of times you use your self-healing ability, otherwise he will probably turn back into a lizard man again. Shen Fei discovered that the self-healing source of lizard serum is lizard cells. If a good balance point is not found, lizard serum and self-healing factors can coexist. At the same time, it counteracts the alienation of the lizard serum. The result is Phoenix 2, which solves the side effects of both, but also reduces the degree of self-healing of both. Boss, you are the person sent by God to save me. Don't be stupid, get some extraordinary spiders. Next, I will be responsible for researching extraordinary spiders, and you can copy my experiments. Change the lizard serum into the Green Goblin potion. You are more familiar with the Green Goblin potion than I am. You should get the hang of it pretty quickly. Yes, boss. End of this chapter.